Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Heart of the Cast. Apologies for skipping last week. Things just got in the way. There was a lot of, mistimed things, and Josh's Deutschland internet was
Yeah.
epic.
But we're back.
Yeah,
That's all that matters.
Indeed. We've got the part two of the history of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Today.
Yes.
A very, very brief overview of about 10 years plus worth of content. If you guys are interested, we did finally get around to setting up the Patreon, which you will be able to take part in as a Discord member. You can help us put together topics, and going forward, we will have a dedicated 10-15 minute section at the end of every podcast, specifically for Patreon questions.
Yes.
So you get the advantage of having that. The link will be in the description if you guys are watching this live. We don't have it fully set up yet, but it is basically done.
It might be done by the time this is uploaded, hopefully.
So it's literally just $1 a month we've decided to sit on. We're not trying to like squeeze out any infinite dollars here. We just want to put this as a very, very affordable little community that we've managed to gather over the course of the last couple of, wow, I mean, it's almost like half a year now.
It's been a while, yeah. It's been a lot of episodes.
Yeah, this is like episode
Crazy
22
how time
or
flies
23
sometimes.
Yeah. So literally, if you're European, it's like 80-90 cents or something per month. That's a pretty good deal. And yeah, we'll be able to get together in the Discord. You can, of course, help towards that Patreon question, which I think is going to be a big feature for all of our podcasts going forward. Yeah. So yeah. And we'll see as well, because we've never really planned to do the extra Patreon exclusive content, because as cool as that is, and shout outs to anyone who does get the time and effort to do that, but it is a lot of work dedicating to make exclusive content when we don't really want to put that stuff behind the
Look,
paywall.
we're struggling to upload the podcast on time, okay? So like, calm down.
Yeah, and I think paywalling like useful, good, information and content, I think behind paywalls is, I don't really think it works in Yu-Gi-Oh! Personally. I don't think it's necessary. So, yeah, that's kind of our stance on it. So it should be fun going forward. We'll have a Discord set up for all you all soon, and then Scrubling can ban or promote any of you as we see fit. Let's dive in. So we left off at the end of 2012 in the part one of the history of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! And the history of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Is now starting in Dragon Rulers.
Yeah, so just in case anyone has missed the first episode, I guess I'll also throw a link to that in the description down below, because we already spent an entire extra long podcast on talking about basically the first half of historic Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. And now we're getting into the second part, where you actually can join the discussion, because you've been part of most of these. Whereas in the first one, you were just kind of like, yeah, I heard.
Yeah, just
I heard
surface level analysis of some decks.
All right, so as soon as we reach the point where you started playing, you just scream and let me know this is the exact time where Farfa started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I don't know exactly where it is. I know it's somewhere in the next like couple formats, but yeah.
Well, what I would say first of all is I think very much this is definitely where the golden age begins, in my opinion. I think the Dragon Rulers all the way up to Link era, I think that sweet spot is just incredible, like level of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's fast enough where it isn't just like set pass mostly, but it's also slow enough where there's turns, there's back and forth, there's interaction, and I think we see a lot of creative deck building. Social media, I think, is also starting to boom at this point. So formats get solved a little faster.
Yeah, the information that's available definitely changes in the later stages of, or like the early stages of the 2010s, as opposed to like the early 2000s. You definitely get deck lists from events. Deck profiles are pretty big at this point in time. Like every event, you'll have like these pixelated deck profiles of people slapping down all the cards in their deck, calling like half of them the best cards in their deck. And Broken.
And that's why I played too.
Yeah, that's the best card in my deck's Broken. And then yeah, but like it's at least, the way that they conveyed the information may have not been the best, but at least we got all the lists out there and all that kind of stuff. And we are looking at, like, to get specific to the year, if we're looking into 2013, I think is pretty well known for. I mean, Dragon Rulers at this point they don't happen at the beginning of 2013, but the beginning of 2013 is just basically a continuation of where we left off with 2012. Right? There's a lot of just water mermail. You get a little Fire Fist into the mix. There's still some rabbit decks out there, some leftovers from Wind Up Rabbit Insector format. Got some Hero Beat, Bubble Beat kind of decks, which is a good format, honestly. Revisiting Meadowlands formats is really, really fun. I think it is one format that has decent amount of potential for retro play.
Okay, I just want to clarify. I thought Meadowlands was the latter part of the year. The after Dragon Rulers essentially get banned, and you have that fire water format. I thought that was like the early 2014.
I've mistaken that before as well. I initially thought that too, but there's essentially two periods where you could call both of these fire water formats realistically. But what people mean when they say fire water format is that's post Dragon Ruler. That the people call that one fire water. And I think it's more accurate because it is a lot closer between fire and water in that period of time. Like it's like fire and water are not the only two decks, but they're definitely the best two. In Meadowlands formats, I think water is better than most other decks, and like fire is not really that big of a deal yet. There is Fire Fist, but like people play Fire Fist, I think mostly with Rabbit in this era. This is like the era where people go Rabbit into 2 copies of Gene Warwolf and make like a Tiger King, which is crazy behavior. But when you can just be like pitching one of your 3 Dragoons for Tias. But anyways, I've never played Fire Fist, if you couldn't tell. I've always been a water main, so yeah.
It's really funny, like modern Josh likes to play the kind of mid-rangey decks, but back in that period it was the high ceiling deck, huh?
See, the deck that I liked has never changed. It's just the other stuff has changed. You know, my decks are still mid-range, but back then
everyone else
mid-range was crazy combo.
Okay, so everyone else is the problem, not you.
Yeah.
All right, so Dragon Ruler's the biggest spike, I think, at this point, outside of Teledad, maybe, they were released in tins, I think, in like March, was it? Or
no, the tins are reprints. It's Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy is the set, which brings the Dragon Rulers, it brings Draco Sack, and it brings Spellbook of Judgment, which is the only card keeping this format from being a technical tier 0 format. I do like to call this format a tier 0 format because it's just Spellbook and Dragon Ruler are miles above everything else, so in my opinion they make up the tier 0 together. But whenever I call it a tier 0 format, there's a bunch of nerds actualies because there's 2 decks, which is technically true. But anyways, it's very commonly referred to as a tier 0 format, and that is obviously because Dragon Rulers is just an incredibly powerful deck, and Spellbooks has like Spellbook of Judgment, which is most of Spellbook's power is concentrated in that one card. Whereas Dragon Ruler has like a lot of really good cards, but the Spellbook of Judgment is completely insane. Just in case any of you guys don't remember, because that card hasn't been relevant in a very long time, even though it has come off the ban list. But Spellbook of Judgment, after you activate it, counts the number of spell cards you activate in a turn, and then in the end phase, you get to add that many Spellbook spells from your deck to your hand and summon a spellcaster from the deck with a level equal to or less than the number that you were able to activate it, right? And so obviously what people do with Spellbook of Judgment nowadays is the same thing they did in 2013, is summon Jaugen in the end phase to lock the opponent out of special summoning. And Spellbook was a really good deck at chaining together at least 3 other spells, which meant that you go end phase, you resolve Judgment, you search at least 3 Spellbooks and summon a Jaugen, which is locking out most other decks in the format. And you just play this really control and grindy game with Spellbook of Judgment every turn. And
it's really funny that people are mentioning in the chat as well that Judgment is 2-sided, which is an interesting dynamic in the mirror match.
It
could,
does count your opponent's quick play spells that they use on your turn. So any sort of like Spellbook of Fate, Spellbook of Wisdom, Book of Moon, that kind of stuff, it will count on your turn as well. Yeah.
So that deck is, funnily enough, I think full power now today, and it was literally, I think, 10 years that card was on the ban list, and then it got limited, and I think now it's at 3.
It's at 3. It should be full power, yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy just to think like how far a deck can can fall that way, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Dragon Rules as well. Like they're currently at full power. They're just not just not the decks they were. But that's 10 years of power creep, I suppose.
Well,
Sticking to
Dragon
the topic, of
Ruler
course.
still doesn't have super rejuve technically, right? That card's still banned.
Oh, is that card not
I
legal at
think
this point?
I actually would think they could
So
bring it back if they wanted to, but I think it's banned.
wait, you mean today? No, it is definitely legal. I
It's
played
legal?
it in Master 2. It was terrible.
It is legal? Okay, I thought it was still
Yes.
banned. Okay. My
Yeah,
bad.
it's funny just how bad like drawing cards in the end
Yeah,
phases.
that's what I was about
Like
to say. I was about to say like that probably could come back. Well, turns out it's already been. And I
yeah.
didn't even notice or I didn't even remember. So yeah, obviously. Yeah, okay.
It's really unfortunate. I like your description of what Dragon Rulers is. You described it as a mid-range like grind deck, which I thought was crazy at the time, but it actually makes a lot of sense if you
It's
wanna.
well, I realized this recently. I don't think I thought about it at the time, but I
Yeah, probably
realized this
not.
when I was trying to make Dragon Rulers work in Master Duel. I realized that the fact that you can only use one of the effects per turn makes like a Dragon Ruler in one singular turn. It doesn't make the card incredibly powerful, right? It's like either you get a special summon or you get a search, right? That's pretty much all that it, or you get a discard effect at like a -1, which all of them go minus on their discard effects because you need to discard 2 cards and usually you get 1 card back. So the one effect of them in one turn doesn't really go a long way. The quality of them is really something that shows in like a longer game that consists of multiple turns, because the fact that yet you never really lose the Dragon Rulers, right? Because even if they're banished, they replace themselves. They go to the graveyard, they can't summon from the graveyard, so on and so forth. Like the fact that that you never really run out, the fact that you can play the game longer than any other deck basically in the game at the time, that's what makes them so powerful. Not the fact that they are incredibly explosive or anything like that. It's just like you cannot outlast 2013 Dragon Rulers with any deck, really. Like that's just not a thing. It is, if you really think about it, even though it was more powerful than most other decks at the time, it is like the king of grind games, and that's why it was unbeatable. I feel like for anything that wouldn't lock them out, and that is the main thing that decks do in this format to beat Dragon Rulers, is to floodgate them out of the game, which that's really what Spellbook is. It doesn't really do much outside of Jaugen and Kaiku to lock out Dragon Rulers. That's all that makes Evil Swarm somewhat viable at the time, is the fact that it locks out level 5 or higher special summons.
Yeah, how often has evil? Well, how relevant and when did the relevance of Evil Swarm become a thing in 2013? Was it like did they get Ophion like
I
late
think
or?
Evil Swarms are already legal before Dragon Rulers, but only very
Hmm.
fringe play. It might be the fact that Kirkion is Kirkion even out in 2013 yet? I'm not sure. But basically, before Dragon Ruler format, you couldn't reliably play Evil Swarm because your deck would like suck against at least 50% of the format. It was like all right against Mermail, but even Mermail had heavy infantry with that could easily be accessed without summoning big monsters.
Yeah,
So
I remember
yeah.
like locals was one of my first real decks was Evil Swarm, and like it's just the amount of times that infantry would just
Yeah.
out Ophion like so easily was disgusting.
Pandemic, because
Um,
Pandemic only protected it from
Spells
spell
and
traps,
traps.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The best thing about this period in time as well, I think, is the mirror match. I think Dragon Rose is celebrated as being a very good mirror match until
Mhm.
around about national season. I think, funnily enough, Patrick Hoban of all players discovered an old card that ended up making.
Yeah.
I don't know if he won nationals, but he got a very deep finish and sort of like exposed to the public the power
I'm
of
pretty
Vanity's
sure that's the
emptiness.
one he won. I'm pretty sure he
Oh, did he win
won
that? Yeah. Okay.
Baby Ruler Nationals, yeah, with Vanity's Emptiness, yeah. And this is like the one thing that I do, like when I really really like the Dragon Ruler mirror. I actually have two Baby Dragon Ruler decks to play with, but I'm choosing to play that format without Emptiness, and I'm also choosing to not play against Spellbooks because those are cringe. If you want, like, if it's just for like the quality of gameplay, I think that's what you should do, is just play Baby Ruler mirrors without Emptiness, and then you're Gucci. But yeah.
So going forward a little bit in September, the babies all get banned.
Yes.
But I
And
think the
Judgment
big
gets banned.
ones
Yeah.
and Judgment as well, yeah. And all the big Dragon rules are at 3, right?
Yes. So This is funnily enough the one that is actually arguably a tier 0 dragon ruler format. Finally, after the first one is, well, actually there's also spellbook. In this one there's
It's
nothing.
when they banned half of them.
Yeah, like it turns out that you can still do the same thing that you did before with dragon rulers, which is outlast and outcontrol every other deck in the format. There are other decks in Ravine ruler format. Is also, I think, a very fun format to revisit. The Ravine ruler mirror match is also really, really cool until Sixth Sense get released. I think Sixth Sense is pretty cringe, and I also don't include it in retro play for that format. But like Ravine rulers is pretty cool. Basically, you would replace the baby, because the baby dragon's main quality was just the fact that you would get access to all the dragon rulers really fast, right? Like you would draw like some of the big ones, some of the small ones, and then you would get all the 4 into rotation, and then you'd be good to go. In Ravine ruler, you make up for that with playing Dragon Ravine, which is why it's called Ravine ruler. And my favorite part about this format is the fact that this is old field spell rules. I don't know how big people realize this is in a deck. Like think of it this way: dragon rulers are this really grindy archetype that really get into like they really show their qualities over the course of multiple turns. And so you're playing this really control heavy mirror match where you really want that Dragon Ravine to be able to get all the dragon rulers together and keep piling resources in the graveyard. But as soon as your opponent activates a Dragon Ravine, you lose your own Dragon Ravine. So it really becomes this sort of dynamic where you need to be careful about when to use your Dragon Ravine. Sometimes it's better to hold it in your hand as a counter to your opponent's potential Dragon Ravine, because this format is very centered around searching a Debris Dragon with Tempest, and then making an Ancient Fairy Dragon, which pops your Dragon Ravine, and because it's the old text of Ancient Fairy, it can add another Dragon Ravine from your deck to your hand after you do that. And then you have to decide, well, do I keep this Dragon Ravine in my hand to counter my opponent's Dragon Ravine, or do I put it out there to expose it to my opponent's Dragon Ravine? Then obviously you turn the Ancient Fairy into like Draco Sags and all that kind of stuff. It's a really fun format. I really enjoyed it.
As a side point here, I've always kind of looked back at the old field spell rules at the time as like very annoying, but it makes a lot of sense. And something that people have kind of suggested in recent times is if we had the old field spell rules, that could act as a kind of balance of sorts potentially for some decks. Being that you just destroy your opponent's field spell by playing your own field spell, just because of like how strong and good field spells have become today. I don't know how you feel about that.
I never thought about it at the time because we never really discussed whether this was a rule that needs changing, right? This kind of feels like this thing that we just all accepted as a core rule of the game, and I think like conceptually it makes sense, right? Because like the whole field, like that's the battleground you're like dueling on, right? That's how it was always portrayed as well in like the anime and such, right? It was like the entire battlefield would change to that thing that you've put on, and so if you like, it wouldn't really make sense conceptually to have two. I never thought about like that. It's kind of like, I think at the time it was a super random change that no one really saw coming. Looking back at specifically Ravine ruler format, this is the only one where I think it really matters from a competitive standpoint. But I think I think I would prefer if we had the old rules still. Like I don't particularly care that much that we don't, but I never understood why it needed changing.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to think about, and potentially could open up some different ways of playing the game, especially as field spells get more stronger. So after Dragon Rulers, we get a ban list in January, and this is when I start playing fully. I think before this, my first
time. You've missed some good formats right there. Like I think 2013 is a really good year for Yu-Gi-Oh, but 2014 is also really good. So you definitely picked a banger year to start.
I think my first locals was October 2013, and I remember writing out a deck profile on Tumblr. If anyone used to use Tumblr, I posted my agent structure deck list, Good old what was her name? Saint Joan or something? The Joan, the main deck monster. I was playing that in Agents because she was a fairy. It was great.
Mhm.
Got absolutely battered by Dragon Rulers naturally at my
Yep.
first locals was October 2013. But I think my first real deck that I ended up actually putting together was in 2014. We had a ban list. All of the Dragon Rulers went to one, which was the most notable thing. And I think there was like one or two like unhits of like Fire Fist cards. I want to say maybe like Tenki or something like went back to three or something. I think something did change that helped Fire Fist. But regardless, this is the period of time where people do refer to the format as Fire Water. This is um, Mermail is arguably the best deck and continues to be the best deck all the way into like deeper in the year. Shout outs to Eugen for winning with Mermail in Europe.
Mhm.
And Fire Fist is also like the I think probably one of the reasons that it's the easiest deck to play and it's the easiest deck to build compared to like Mermail, which is like I want to say like significantly harder than Fire Fist, as we see a lot of iterations of Fire Fist developing to what they call +1 Fire Fist, which is essentially you're just playing bear, Tenki,
Yeah.
gorilla, maybe some dragons, and you're just summoning. You're popping a card with bear, you're attacking, and you're setting another Tenki, and you're doing it again next turn,
It's
and you're
just
backing it up.
basically good stuff monsters backed up by solid trap cards is what
Yeah.
the Fire Fist deck is, which can be a fun playstyle. If you're not into the kind of at the time you would call these combo decks, right? Mermails from today's perspective, they're still relatively slow, but those kind of there's like throughout 2014 there's like different stages where like in the beginning it's relatively cookie cutter. You got fire, you got water, you got some spell books leftovers. Maybe the
You can
early
still play
stages.
spellbooks without judgment at this
Yeah,
point.
and
Yeah.
spellbook surprisingly is a viable strategy both before and after judgment, right? Even before judgment in Meadowlands format, spellbooks is actually a playable deck. It's completely playable. It's a very grindy deck where you put up the spellbook tower and like recycle your spellbooks every turn, summon priestess, pop cards, you get like fate every turn to banish. It's a solid deck. Nothing crazy, but viable, and it's this basically back to that state in 2014 after Judgment gets banned. It just didn't get much attention before Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy, and now after everyone knows what Spellbook is capable of, I think it gets a little more attention in 2014, although still not super popular.
I just want to mention as well, a very important thing that happens at this part of the cycle of Yu-Gi-Oh is there's the proliferation of the streaming content via ARG, Alter Reality Games, who unfortunately made some very poor decisions later. But in 2014, this was the heyday of Yu-Gi-Oh social media and exposure to the content. I think it was like the previous year before this, Europe started streaming the major events. But obviously, major events, you're only getting like 3 or 4 YCSs a year. ARGs were having maybe like bi-weekly. Sometimes there was an ARG every week, and there would be like a stream of some of the best players across the East Coast attending these ARGs, which were essentially just unofficial tournaments. They had cash prizing, which was a really big incentive for people to play. And for these pro players as well, really good players to travel to these events and do well. Again, some really very poor decisions were made with like buying buys and stuff like that, but it was genuinely some of the best competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content that existed at this time, and it was an insane, great way to keep up with the meta. And we just see like regular tournaments all the time, and this is, I think, really where that social media boom happens. And
it's
yeah,
just
I
more.
mean,
It's just we wanted more tournaments to not even necessarily play in, because as a European, I've never played in an ARG. But even just the ability to look back on what's going on over there, on almost a weekly basis, actually, was really cool.
I think they might still have some VODs up on YouTube, or like at least some of the iconic duels, but they're some of the most iconic games you've ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Like are in the ARG games. I
Like the
mean,
one where I think, what is it? Doesn't Warning the Denko or something?
yeah, there's like a guy who gets to top 8 or something, and then like his opponent summons Denko. He like checks his 5 back row, tries to book it, and then like reads Denko, and then he like foolish burial sends Shadow Dragon. Shadow Dragon pops a back row, and it's a warning that he could have just used on the Denko. We see some of the funniest clips as well. If anyone has seen the Dank series by Slacker Magician on YouTube, he's got like a clip of a full Infernity combo being done, and then Jeff Jones just making a Bujin Sasano, activating Honest, and
Oh yeah,
attacking the
attacking
entire field
everything.
for a
Yeah, yeah,
game.
yeah.
Speaking of which, this is also during this early period of 2014. We see, like, again, there's like a lot of the decks that are viable. We talk about Fire Water, but Dragon Rulers are still viable at this point, by the way. A little bit deeper into summer when they get Soul Charges, when they become a real force. But people did play Hieratic Rulers, is what it's known as. Was the best way to play Dragon Ruler in the early part of 2014. We had Bujins, which I don't know. I think they got some support in Primal Origin. It might have been like Bujingi Hair, I think. But you had Yamato, you had Crow, and I think Turtle as well.
You also had the most important Bujin card, which is Kaiser Coliseum. So it was basically just summon Yamato, activate Kaiser Coliseum, and then protect the Yamato at all costs.
Yeah, it was the true boss monster that was very difficult to out, because targeting was really the only way you could get rid of things, and they would have a card in the graveyard called Turtle that could just negate a targeted effect every end phase.
They have all kinds of different ways to protect it. They got like a pseudo honest, which is Bujingi Crane. They got some stuff that protects it when it's in the graveyard. So like Yamato end phase, in an optimal world, you would add a Crane and then discard a Hair, which Crane has an effect in hand to protect the Yamato from battle, and then Hair has an effect in the graveyard, I think, from stopping targeting. So you just like protect the Yamato, and opponents can't really play under your Kaiser Coliseum. Yeah.
I think one of the most important decks in this period as well is Girgia, which I think really dominates up until around about Battles of Legends.
Dude. I hated Girgia.
Yeah, so Girgia has a monster called Girgia Armor, which works essentially like a GOAT format Pac-Man card. You flip you flip it up, you add like a Girgia monster, or I think Girgia card.
Yeah.
And then it just flips itself back down, and then you're playing into like, Warning, you're playing into Bottomless, Compulse, Blackhorn of Heaven as well is pretty popular at this time.
Yeah, you go set armor, set 5, and then call it a day, get your pluses every turn until you can eventually pop off, because the entire deck is made up of the Girgias are level 4s, and then the Girgianos are level 3s, but you can
there's a way to make them level 4.
Girgigant X and all that, and get some more pluses and actually start attacking.
If you remember the end phase trap card that they would,
Girgia Gear, I hated Girgia Gear, dude.
Oh my god. So for those of you who are wondering what this is, imagine your opponent just goes armor set 4 back row. Set 5 back row, because you draw 6 at this point, right? Yeah, so they go armor, set 5 back row, and then, they'll like trap you like 2 or 3 times, you pass, and then in the end phase, they activate this card called Girgia Gear, which is just a 0 downside E-Telly for 2 from the deck.
Yeah.
And then they just start their turn with like a set armor and 2 level 4 machines, and they just pop off and kill you with multiple gear giant X's or something. It was tough to play against.
And so this then transitions into the format that everyone remembers the most, I feel like, from 2014, which is hat format. And that is because of the release of some Dragon of Legends. I don't know exactly which one, but there's a Dragon of Legends set that releases Ice Hand, Fire Hand, and I think Mathematician as well, for what it's worth. My boy Mathematician. And then Soul Charge, which, yeah.
Hey, you forgot Curry Bandit.
And is Curry Bandit also in that one? Okay, yeah. It's a pretty good set, honestly. It's a pretty good set for what it's worth. And
that was a little bit about Soul Charge.
All those cards had a big impact, but Soul Charge is definitely a card that has changed Yu-Gi-Oh! Or will change Yu-Gi-Oh! For the upcoming years. Because it lets you revive as many monsters as you want from your graveyard. You skip your battle phase and you lose 1,000 life points for doing that. But skipping your battle phase, usually cards that do that are pretty good. So historically, and losing 1,000 life points.
Don't forget, time rules aren't a thing at this point either. The time rules in Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point is you basically just play another duel. You get 4 turns, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so 5 total. So life points is irrelevant. Like you don't care about that in any circumstance. It very
rarely matters, actually. Like it's just like using a couple 1,000 life points, because you can decide how much you're willing to spend. Like even if you're starting to get low, using Soul Charge for 1 or 2 monsters is still a very good use of the card. But in like early stages of the game, if you can somehow put a bunch of monsters into the graveyard, You can utilize Soul Charge as like a revive for 2, 3, 4 monsters, and that's just really, really strong. So people still play a lot of Control as like a leftover from early 2014. There still is. There's this deck called Hat, which is what the format is actually named after, which I think historically is not the best deck anymore. It's one of those things where at the time people thought that was the best way to approach the game, was like to play like a slow Control, a lot of trap cards type deck, right? And it's called Hat because it combines hands, artifacts, and trap tricks. So with Primal Origin, you get Moral Attack, the artifact that pops face-up cards your opponent controls, and you have artifact Sanctum to just summon it up from the deck. So it's a really, like, at the time, being able to summon a 2100 beat stick that also pops a card is really strong. You
also get Scythe in this set as well, by the way.
And
which
no one cares.
Ironically,
like
no one
years.
played it.
Yeah.
And even historically, if you play that format, it's not really that good, because you get Scythed and then they poke you with a hand and then you pass and then you play next turn. So it just wasn't like, it didn't do enough, I think. Yeah. You could probably side Sanctum into Scythe maybe in some decks, like in hindsight now, but no one
could have done it for some matchups. Like I could imagine that sometimes like scything maybe an Infernity deck or something would be really good. But yeah, people at the time only cared about Moral Attack. They only wanted to get that juicy +1 off of the Sanctum, and that was enough for them, right? It's just a culmination of a lot of cards that go +1, whether it's Card D, which is super popular in this year, whether it's Trap Tricks Myrmelio, searching a trap hole card, or the Ice and Fire Hand, which are like Ice Hand, when it gets destroyed, destroys a spell card, and then summons Fire Hand, and Fire Hand, when it's destroyed a monster, and then summons Ice Hand. So a lot of like little +1s here and there.
You had to be really careful with like your turn 1, because going second, a hand deck like could just summon a Fire Hand, crash, pop your monster, crash into another monster, pop your back row, summon a fire, like, and you could just wipe a field with like going from fire to Ice Hand constantly. And it was something you definitely had to think about when you went first.
Yep.
And people are mentioning Cat and Fat, if you remember what those decks are.
Okay, so I know that Fat is a version of the deck that doesn't play hands, but it plays Fire Fist instead. So it's Fire Fist, Artifact, Trap Tricks, and Cat with a K, I think, is a Curry Bandit version.
Yeah, so like it's based on like Grave Revival. I think you're like getting like everything into the grave with Curry Bandit, because if you guys don't know what Curry Bandit is, it's a monster that you can normal summon, go to the end phase, tribute it, mill 5 cards, and then add a spell or trap you mill to your hand for your next turn, which sounds absolutely unplayable today, which it is.
Yeah.
But it was fine to wait a turn in 2014.
Yeah, there are some. So basically, you got the whole. You got two sides to this format. You have the whole Control Andy decks, which are not stun decks. I want to clarify that they're actually very close to like what you would consider a control deck, but there's very little stunning going on in these decks, which is like you got Hat and all kinds of variations. You got Geargia, maybe some Fire Fist decks, all that kind of stuff. Those were like the quote unquote trap decks of the format. And then you have the other side, which is decks that are trying to utilize Soul Charge to its max potential. Like a bunch of combo / mid-rangey decks that try to put monsters into the graveyard and then use Soul Charge. Those are like Mermail, Infernity. You've got Sylvans, which is a very popular deck, especially in NA at the time. And you have like Lightsworn, Dragon Ruler variants also using like Curry Bandit, where instead of like just using it for value, like in the artifact decks, you can also just use it to actually mill some crazy stuff in your end phase. Get your graveyard set up with Lightsworns and Dragon Rulers, and then summon Judgment Dragons and all that kind of stuff in that Lightsworn deck, which actually got second place at the European Championship that year. The finals was Mermails against Lightsworn. So the Trap Andes lost out in Europe, but they did succeed in NA, where in NA the finals was a Hat Mirror. So basically 2 trap decks in the finals of NAWCQ that year.
Let's talk a little bit about Sylvan. Some of you might not really remember, because Sylvan unfortunately was, I mean, depending how you really see, unfortunately, because it was a combo deck that really was the epitome of build a board at the time. But it was a deck that, took full advantage of Soul Charge. And Lone Fire Soul Charge as a 2-card combo, both of them being at 3, was like a really ridiculous way to you would just win the game basically. And some of the really crazy parts of Sylvan that made it really strong, they had this card called Araya, I think, the Hierophant Araya. I think it's a rank 7 or rank 8 that lets you essentially stack like the top X cards of your deck.
I'm pretty sure it's
And then you,
Alcei. The rank 8
Alcei,
is
that's
Alcei. Yeah.
oh, but I don't think it's Alcei, it's the other guy.
Aurea is the rank 7.
Yeah, yeah. So that I think you can like you can stack like the top X cards of your deck, which is very relevant because Sylvans want to excavate, and then you know what you're excavating.
This
and
is
then you
where
can
the word
also
excavate was implemented, by the way. It
yes,
wasn't a
that,
thing before this year. Yeah, it was new. It was a new lingo.
new term. I think it was Curry Bandit that was the first excavate card.
It may have been that or the Sylvans. I don't know what came out first, but yeah.
Yeah. So you could like stack your deck for excavations with the rank 7, and then you could like post side you could go into Sylvan Charity, which was it's just graceful charity for the deck, and you can then draw into your like side cards. It's really very powerful at the time. But I think a lot of people who play this format in hindsight realize very quickly that Infernity is without a doubt like the best deck. Infernity being a deck, well, I suppose who you ask potentially, but it's very strong and it does win Worlds this year.
Yeah,
Special summoning arts.
I think it is probably the best quote unquote combo deck in the format, where it takes a couple setup turns, but then it goes off really well and establishes really good boards, especially with Infernity Barrier, which is I think what sets it apart from other decks. Like both Sylvan and Mermail can make really powerful boards, but they can't back it up with a card as powerful as Infernity Barrier, where Infernity really reaches that you can't win the game anymore point, I think, the best when it combos off. Because Mermail when it combos off is really strong, Sylvan when it combos off is really strong, but Infernity when it combos off just wins the game. I think that's a slight difference between the two. Also, Infernity theoretically is the most robust of the three because it does actually play a solid trap lineup. So while you're just trying to control the game with like Mermail, it just like by sitting on like Abyss Lind and stuff like that, or Sylvan, you just got to go off very early on or hit a really good Curry Bandit or you're doomed. But the Infernity deck I think is the most like consistent and has the best like mid-range gameplay out of the three probably.
Yeah, I think basically the addition of Soul Charge is really what threw this deck like into ridiculous realms of power. Just the ability to go into Exciton Knight, which is a card we didn't bring up, but it's a card that's extremely relevant in this format. It's a rank 4 that destroys all cards on the field as long as you are -1 in card advantage to your opponent in total.
Mm-hmm.
So if you overlay that's a -1, then you also have to try get rid of another card when you're going second, which is usually done just by playing into a trap card or something potentially. And then you could go into Exciton Knight, blow up the entire field, or your opponent would stop your Exciton Knight, and then you just Soul Charge, and you try it again. Exciton was a huge part of the Infernity strategy, and people were playing 2 copies in their extra deck. That's how important it was to go second.
You wouldn't even need to play 2, because it's actually it's just once per chain, not once per turn. So you could, like, depending on what someone used to stop it, you could, like, if they Fiendish Chained it, for example, you can, like, pop the Fiendish Chain later and then use it again. Something like that.
Yeah, it was one of the first, like, once per chain cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Funnily enough, is Exciton Knight. But so many people used to misplay into it. Like, you would go summon Exciton, and then on summon, they would, like, Fiendish or Breakthrough Skillet, and then you would just chain it. Like, people learned their chain links in that format, let me tell you.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Duelist Alliance.
Duelist Alliance. All right. So we're going from this at format. What is that? What is Soul Charge at during Duelist Alliance, actually? Because it's not banned yet. I know that.
I think it's at 3 for like a very short while, then it goes to 1.
So in Duelist Alliance format, I'm checking the ban list right now. It's still at 3 during Duelist Alliance. And I'm asking that because I don't remember people still playing it much. Because Duelist Alliance is a set that releases 3 major archetypes, well, 2 major archetypes and Satellar Knight. But it's Shaddoll and Burning Abyss, basically, is what this format is that's happening right now. We got Shaddoll, we got Burning Abyss, both with their first wave of support, which means for Burning Abyss, you only have, I think it's Skarm, Graf, Seer, and Dante. I think that's
Bro
literally
says only. That's all you need, bro. What else was good? Like, what else do you need?
I mean, yeah, no, you're right. The deck's already good. On the
Was there a
back
trap
of
cards?
like
I think you had like Traveler or something as well.
maybe
But
there
yeah.
was Traveler, but I don't think it was worth playing it because you only had those three, so you wouldn't like realistically really set this up. So it's funnily enough, people you would use Burning Abyss decks as like just literally using the Burning Abyss as like cyber dragons to like summon Ryza over it. I think that's very common in like Burning Abyss decks, right? They summon like they tribute it
Yeah.
for monarchs and stuff like that.
So I
But
remember this
yeah,
exact timeline, and the Ryza was popularized by Jeff Jones, I think. Is so the first major event at this point is an ARG. It's crazy to say that now, but we did look to ARGs
Mhm.
for like meta-defining combos and builds and lists and stuff. And what so as soon as those lines released, I think there's like an ARG on like the following weekend or something. Um, and Jeff Jones wins it with Burning Abyss. It's literally 20 trap cards. I think he's playing Mathematician as well.
Yeah, it's like tour
Um,
guide is at 3, and then you got some mathematicians.
yeah, so remember as well, people did go crazy for Burning Abyss at the start because they were like, "Oh my god, you can search tour guide with this deck," but it didn't really, um, dominate or take off just yet until Jeff popularized it with his
Mhm.
ARG win.
Yeah.
And also at this time, we see that Satellarknight is probably the quote unquote best deck because it does really well at this ARG. But that's mostly because people don't really know how to like build Shaddoll yet. People are experimenting with like back row and stuff like that compared to Satellarknight, which is like just summon a rank 4 foreheads, right? That's
Yeah.
not very difficult.
Yeah.
But I think someone in here actually ends up doing pretty well with Shaddoll at some point. Is that am I missing?
Yeah,
Am I
it's the
remembering that well?
yes, that is the format I won my first YCS in, which is YCS Madrid, which I think is the first one after Duelist Alliance release.
I think so, yeah.
Which
It's Madrid then London.
is Madrid then London, yeah. Yeah, so I played a very cookie cutter Shaddoll deck with artifacts because Shaddolls at the time only had Shaddoll Fusion as their fusion spell. So a lot of it was a lot of the format was about playing around Shaddoll Fusion's ability to fuse from the deck. So a very common play was if even if you had access to a fusion monster, you would fuse into a construct, send Hedgehog, search Shaddoll Beast, and then tribute set the beast. That was like the opener about in Shaddolls, where you would actually not want to leave an extra deck monster on the board. So
Yeah, it's crazy just
yeah,
how punishing it is to like fusion from the deck. It was really, and I think
yeah.
this is like another big power spike we see in Yu-Gi-Oh because dealing with if you're not playing Shaddoll, dealing with a Winda is really difficult. You need to like essentially just draw the out, which is like Compulse or something. And like again, if you're playing trap cards in a format that's like getting faster,
Mhm.
it's a bit
Well, it's
it,
tough. It's tough for some decks, but not for most of these. Like I said, this is for example why the Burning Abyss decks use cards like Caius or Ryza, because you can very well in one special summon just special a BA and summon a Monarch to get rid of that Winda. Like I think
yeah.
relying on Winda in this format is actually something you don't do very often, especially not if you don't know the matchup. Like if you're playing a Shaddoll Mirror, you never want to pass on Winda because that's all it takes for your opponent to activate Shaddoll Fusion and go like +4, just because you summoned that Winda and then run over it anyways. So in this format, funnily enough, I don't think Winda is a problem just yet. It is about to become a really big problem, especially for Burning Abyss. When Burning Abyss gets another wave of support, I don't know what the next set is called, but it's the one that gives
Next
them like
challengers.
next challengers. Yeah, it's the one that gives them like Rubik and Virgil. And I think now you have both of the trap cards, and you can actually play like the Fire Lake, maybe Traveler, Burning Abyss decks that I don't
Yeah.
think play Monarchs anymore. And
Yep.
those are a lot more monster heavy. You'd probably know more about this than me at this point, because I've always been a Shaddoll main after winning Madrid with it, which was probably not correct. I will admit that I was a Shaddoll main, but I kind of missed the
I
memo
think
on the fact that it wasn't the best deck anymore at some point.
I think
Um,
it's very powerful. So this is
it's
what we
good, yeah. No,
call
it's not like terrible, but this is like the one time where I think maybe I should have played BA, and this is the only time I'll say this in the history of the game.
clip
So
it, clip it, clip it. This is what we call triangle format, and I think it's what historically people look at to find like a good format. There's three solid decks All of them are kind of a little bit rock, paper, scissors against each other, depending on, like, in theory, like Shaddoll should beat BA, which should beat Cliffort, which should beat Shaddoll.
Yeah.
But they are relatively evenly matched to the point that you get really good games of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, it really is like such a good format at this point. And of course, this is where Pendulum is released. Not the first iteration of the powerful Pepe deck, which comes a little bit later, but Cliffort is the very first Pendulum deck, which doesn't really play too much like a Pendulum deck. It's kind of one of the OG, like, I say OG, it's 2014 at this point. Stun decks.
Well,
It
that's
really
10
is
years
like,
ago. That's OG.
yeah, yeah, modern Yu-Gi-Oh. So you could use this is where the pay 8 feel great meme comes from, because Cliffort Scout is a scale that says pay 800 life points. You add any Cliffort card from your deck to your hand. And what you can do is you could just like summon a big Cliffort monster. Well, I say summon, so the Clifforts you can normal summon them, or you can tribute summon them, depending on what you want to do, and then they gain their effect. They're unaffected by monsters.
They're pendulum monsters with like I think 2400 attack, at least the
Yeah.
level 5 or 6 ones. But you can normal summon them without tributing, and then they go to, I want to say, 1800. And so basically, long story short, the deck just has great synergy with skill drain and emptiness.
With skill drain, yeah.
And emptiness. So that is
flip
the
skill
main
drain.
quality of Clifford at this time, is the fact that you just play a card into your scale that gives you a +1 every turn. You have a bunch of you have a bunch of dudes that you can just normal summon that are solid in terms of stats. They have effects when they're tributed. They don't destroy your own emptiness when they're tributed, because they don't go to the graveyard.
Yeah.
And you just beat these decks that rely on either effects or special summons. So yeah.
So one of the quote-unquote weaknesses of Vanity's Emptiness was that if you destroy another card, the emptiness leaves the field.
Yep.
So you go MST another back row, and then the MST dies, so you just kind of go +1. Yep. If you out a big Cliffort monster, it just goes to the extra deck, and it doesn't leave the field. So they keep the Vanity's Emptiness up, and then they can summon another Cliffort next turn. So it was basically a stun deck, but it was also just like really powerful, because I think you also had... Does Towers get released at this point, I think?
No.
Not yet? Okay.
Towers, at least, maybe it's out, but it definitely doesn't see play until Necros format, I think. It's out?
Yeah,
okay, yeah. Maybe it's out, but I don't remember anyone really playing it.
It did get really popular at the next sort of national season. At this point in the time, you are playing this kind of like triangle format, with Cliffort being this sort of stun deck-ish. And despite that, it's kind of ironic. It's still a decent format, because unless if you're a Shaddoll player, the floodgates hurt you a lot.
Yeah.
But against Burning Abyss, like you set trap cards, Dante still mills under 3, your BA still trigger in the graveyard. So like it's a decent matchup for Burning Abyss, and it cannot be understated how good it was to play Fire Lake, which just you set Fire Lake going first. Pendulum player sets 2 scales, and then you just pop both of them. It's really powerful. So yeah, it's a good format. Next challengers, I think the biggest iconic thing that you should probably talk about is this is when we get Denko, the baby dragons, which is insane how long they've stayed relevant for. But the baby dragons are this old. And the second Shaddoll fusion, L Shaddoll fusion, is the quick play one. Yeah. So these 3 additions really boost that deck.
Yeah, so one of the main problems, quote unquote, with first wave of Shaddolls was the fact that you only had 1 fusion spell, which is partially why I elected to play 3 copies of Shaddoll Hedgehog, which was flip effect search Shaddoll fusion at YCS Madrid, which was like crazy, but like a slow opener of like said Hedgehog into getting your Shaddoll fusion going was good enough for me at the time. But this is where you can now play El Shaddoll fusion, and because it's a quick play fusion, it also makes Winda a whole lot better, because you can just like not end on a monster from the extra deck in case your opponent is playing Shaddolls themselves. But then if you see, well, my opponent is playing Burning Abyss and reveals like the first BA in hand, you can just be like, well, chain El Shaddoll fusion to that and summon Winda. And now you've summoned Winda without risking getting Shaddoll fusion, right? So it's really, really strong for Shaddolls. But yeah, the big downfall for Shaddolls, they are a powerful deck in this format, but they are not resilient to floodgates at all. They are by far the more, outside of Winda. Winda is the one floodgate that really hurts BA, but BA, because of like their natural synergy with cards like Wing Blast and Karma Cut, which are super popular at the time, they have so many outs to all kind of different situations, right? And like you don't even go minus by using those cards. You just pitch your Skarm or Seer or Graph or whatever, and you're good to go. And
I
yeah.
think you have what's it called? Farfa at this time, ironically enough, or I think it's early January.
Well, I'm looking at lists. I think Farfa comes out in next challengers. Yeah.
Secrets of Eternity.
Oh no, it's Secret of Eternity. Okay.
Someone did the copy pasta. Yeah, that ended up helping Burning Abyss quite a lot, which takes us deeper into the format. There was a YCS Charleston, and we see an almost tier 0 performance from Burning Abyss. I think it was like 20 or 21 of the top cut spots were all Burning Abyss, which is really funny because of just how hard everything falls off with the Secret Forces.
Whenever I'm thinking of the Secret Forces, I can't help but think of the that meme that someone made with the KEKW guy.
That was me.
Wait, you made that video?
I think so. Yeah, the how it's all expensive and stuff.
They're gonna pull pink dolphins? You made that?
Yes.
Does no shot.
What? It's joking about like the short prints and stuff of the Necros cards.
Yeah, you made that?
Yes.
Bro, you made.
I feel like Tony Hawk right now.
That's actually crazy. That's one of the funniest videos out there. I didn't know you were capable
yeah,
of doing
you're
something.
welcome, dude.
Nah,
right,
wait.
Anyway.
Konami Secret Forces. I'm double checking this. I'm fact checking this.
Wait, hold on.
It's on the TCG Lovers channel.
Oh, I'm lying. Oh, I made the can I say this on stream? You know the 1945 German president? I made that one if you ever saw that.
Okay, I've never heard someone refer to him like that, but okay.
The movie Downfall, it was released at this time.
Yeah, okay, but that's not the one that you did not create the most beautiful piece in Yugi Tubing's history. Okay.
God, I swear to God,
I can't believe you would just make that up to me like that.
No, dude, I made like so many KEKW Spanish guy memes.
Yeah, but like that one's actually funny.
I feel so embarrassed right now. Literally, Paul.
You tried to steal the most beautiful piece of Yugi Tubing history. I can't believe it.
I just love the Spanish guy, man. What can I say? All right. Anyway, Secret Forces, yeah. So Necros, which is fantastic.
Necros is one of my favorite archetypes of all time, and it is really unfortunate that the format is ruined by one single card.
Jin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just for context, Necros is incredibly expensive at the time, which is like not even funny. I never owned a Necros deck at the time. I went borrowing. I went from trying to find Necros cards for one event, and then trying to find Necros cards for the next tournament, and then so on and so forth. It was just a constant cycle of trying to find someone with extra Necros cards. But Necros is a really powerful and hyper consistent deck. That has a lot of, similar to Dragon Rulers actually, a lot of recursion and a lot of ways to not die. A lot of like control elements to it, but also the capability to OTK relatively quickly. And it's all ruined by the fact that Jin Releaser of Rituals, a card from like 2009, I want to say, is still there, which if you ritual summon using that card as material while that monster is on the board, your opponent can't special summon.
And to note that the rank 4 Lavavel chain is still legal at this point. And Necros could use Manju or Senju, overlay with a Unicorn to send a card or stack a card as well, which they can do some funny tech plays with. To draw with Valkyris, to then draw like a Necro Valley. Some people used to do that in the mirror match, for example. You could just do like dumb stuff with Lavavel chain. But I think this is a trend, and we see like this period of time where it's like very much like, okay, play our new decks. Because if you weren't playing Shaddoll or BA during Duelist Alliance or Clifford, you were not having a good time. If you're not playing Necros now, you're not having a good time. It's really, really rough, I think, for budget players, because I think Bryanak, was peaking at like 90 pounds. I remember I sold one Bryanak for 90 freaking pounds. It's rough. And it's also designed to really punish the extra deck. So if you're not getting Jin locked, which is bad enough as it is, Bryanak bounces 2 cards from back to the extra deck. Why does it bounce 2 and not just 1? It's ridiculous. And you have Unicorn, which is a skill drain for extra deck monsters.
Yeah.
There's never been a healthy Unicorn, by the way. Just want to say, well, I guess it's Unicore technically, but you know. So it was basically
true.
you had to pretty much play Necros
A Nightmare
or like,
Unicorn? Come on.
the healthiest one, sure. Wait, there's a new Mulchummy? Hold on. Sorry, this is like mid-podcast like announcement.
Wait, what?
Could we get a source, chat? This isn't like an educated guess. Hold on. This is a trusted source that's giving me this information. Oh my god, there's a new Mulchummy.
All right.
Oh, it's from Rage of the Abyss. Hold on. This is sorry. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you're getting our live reaction. Does anyone have a translation? It's on the OCG Twitter. Yeah. Does anyone have a source real quick? Okay. Well, if some we'll keep go. Oh, is this it? It's a wind level 4 winged beast. During the turn you activate this, you can only activate the effects of other Mulchummy. By the way, did call it that they were going to make a series of these. During your opponent's turn, if there are no cards on your field, discard this from your hand and activate it. During the turn, apply follows. So every time your opponent specials a monster from their extra deck, you draw 1 card. You draw 1 card. So it's maxi for the extra deck.
Wait, that's insane.
They just they just around. Oh my god, dude! Wow, that's
But that's crazy.
that's ridiculous.
Well, like the first one. By the way, what do we call this now? I used to call it Mulchummy, and now they're all Mulchummies.
Army.
Anyways, I'm in shambles.
Mulch Army.
Yes,
the thoughts.
So Purulia, you could oh god, you could argue
He's dying.
some decks don't really care that much about it. You get like 1, 2, 3 draws maybe. This one, depending on the deck, like
Wait, it's deck as well.
it's deck or extra deck.
There's no way that's a real translation. That's just Maxi. Like, there's no difference.
Nah,
like,
it's not
basically.
Maxi. Come on, calm
Okay,
down.
okay. I know, fair. But like, that's still insane.
I mean, the no controlling no cards alone makes it better than Maxi in terms of design.
Yeah.
But like,
Holy crap. It's still so strong.
but is
Wow.
it
It makes the
Is
first
it
Mulchummy
bad,
look
though?
terrible.
like
Is it bad?
No, is it like bad design?
Yeah, I think that's still too strong.
But weren't people saying like as long as you can't get max seed when they go first is like kind of okay?
I mean, that's like the best argument, but it's still like a poor situation to be in. I think this only. I feel like they should have just made it say main deck or extra deck, not both. God, that's really, really busted. I think like by the way, this like just makes the first Mulchummy like useless, right? I don't think you're really gonna use like the first one because
Against
you can't
most modern decks, you would always rather cite that one. Yeah,
It's
it does give you the ability to like think about it, like compare what is better against what deck. And there are decks where the first one is going to be better because maybe some decks don't summon like 4 times from the extra deck. There's like it's like particularly good against all this link climbing, which I guess is an idea that I agree with, toning that down a little bit, but it's still pretty. That might be like too powerful.
I just realized. You know the restriction on the Mulcharmies? It says you can only activate one other Mulcharmy. So you can go like Purulia.
Yeah, you can do both.
And just draw into it and then use that. Like, okay, so before we go, I don't know. Like, don't forget the drawback in the end phase. You do kind of like lose like random cards, but I mean, you're still dropping hand traps in the process of your opponent's special summoning. That's the issue.
I will say one thing, and that is that I do prefer these kind of hand traps over hand traps that stop your opponent. Generally, not like always, but like in the case of Maxi, it's definitely overtuned. But cards like Phantasme or the first Mulchummy, I'd rather play against those cards than get like Veiler, Impermed, Ghost Ogre, and all that. But this is
Apparently, it's not once per turn, by the way.
It would make sense because the first one isn't either. The Mole Charmy Perulia is not once per turn either. It just says you can only activate one other Mole Charmy per in this turn. So you're like limited as to how many effects you apply to your opponent.
Oh god. So do you think they're banning Maxi? Like this has to just be like.
But that's what I said on the first one though.
But this one is this is a really powerful one.
I mean, look, if the answer to that question is yes, I will take the straight. I would rather have this card in my game than Maxi in my game.
My god.
100%. But yeah.
All right. Hopefully we'll get a more accurate translation at some point, just in case.
We need confirmation on this, but like we're going to discuss this further.
Yeah, this did literally just drop 8 minutes ago, so you're getting our live action. We should probably jump back into the.
Yeah, we need to finish this podcast.
Finish this podcast here, but should we keep this in? Should we edit this part out?
I don't mind keeping it in. I don't like jump scare.
Yeah, sure, it's fine.
Have everyone lose their minds while listening to the podcast. That's cool.
All right. Well, anyway, so back to Nekroz, huh? That's crazy.
So Nekroz, I think the most important card that we haven't talked about yet, that shapes basically the entire format that isn't Jhin, is Nekroz of Trishula. Which the Trishula Synchro was already a really good card when it released. Nekroz of Trishula is basically the same thing. And so the ability to banish a card from field, hand, and graveyard is really, really powerful and meta-defining. Meta-defining to the point that because Nekroz of Trishula actually has to banish from field, graveyard, and hand, you can't, if one of them is empty, you can't do it. There's this meta game in this format where people in the Nekroz mirror actually, if they want to go second because you don't want to get trished, and if you go first, you actually try to end on an empty field. This is the only, I feel like the only ever like tier 0 format where the end board is literally nothing.
Yep, it's good to pass, and it's one of the first formats. Well, I think Shadal did it as well, but it's actually like super relevant to go second. Like you're willingly opting to go second, which I feel like doesn't really happen that often.
Yeah. And this dynamic is ruined by Jhin because obviously then the player going first, they can't really make a board because it's going to get trished. If you can't set up a Nekroz of Valkyris, which stops the battle phase, you are in a big threat of just dying. So your best bet is to just like summon a monster with the Jhin and lock your opponent out of the game and hope they don't have an out to it. Which is really, it feels really gambly. You would think like, yeah, why wouldn't I do that? Well, the answer is people played outs to the Jhin lock in the form of, for example, Book of Eclipse, which put the monster face down. And now all of a sudden, because you've ignored the existence of Trishula, you've put a monster onto the board. If your opponent has the out, it basically is the same as losing the game. So summoning the Jhin is it almost felt like a coin flip where like, as a good player, you really wouldn't want to rely on it because it felt really bad summoning Jhin and then your opponent had Book of Eclipse and the game turns into this like really mediocre game where your opponent just gets to trish you for free and you probably just lost the game because you went for it. So yeah, it sparked this whole thing of like, and also you had to play those Jhin outs, which if your opponent didn't go for the Jhin were really mediocre cards in your deck. It's really annoying.
Yeah, I think there was like a big debate between Exiled Force, Bullblader /
oh yeah, this is about to happen. There's like, because Rhoda is at it's sometimes at 3, sometimes at 2 during Nekroz formats, but because Nekroz has warriors anyways and naturally wants to play Rhodas, people play different targets to out the Jhin lock as well with Rhoda, like Exiled Force. But the annoying thing here as well is the fact that Nekroz theoretically has an out to all of those outs, and you have to gamble and guess which one your opponent is going to have or play. Because Nekroz of Gungnir prevents your Nekroz monster from being destroyed by card effects, I think. Nekroz of Valkyris can stop attacks. Nekroz of Trishula can stop targeting. So depending on which one you played, they had ways to negate it. Like Gungnir stops Exiled Force. DD Warrior Lady is stopped by Valkyris. Same is true for Bullblader, all that kind of stuff. So you have to basically guess which one your opponent would have, which is really annoying.
Just a little small update on the Mulch Army. It has been confirmed the official text is main deck and extra and or. So it's both. Feels good, huh? All right. Um, so where are we at? We're like 2015. I suppose Nationals is won by Burning Abyss in NA, ironically enough, and Shaddoll in Europe. Uh,
Yeah.
So as powerful as Necros is, I think the meme is that it didn't win any of the national championships. That might also be true for Central and South America.
So Necros is the first format where it becomes really apparent that sometimes the only way to beat a certain deck is to floodgate the shit out of it, and Necros is one of those cases where the deck is really streamlined. It's got a ton of searchers, really consistent, but that makes it so like it's super weak to certain cards like Mistake, like even something like a Thunder King or whatever. But Mistake really being the top one, and then like Emptiness, because the Necros Mirror was basically trapless. A lot of Necros decks elected to forego cards like Mystical Space Typhoon because it was terrible in the mirror match. Which just meant that if your opponent had Secret Village of the Spellcasters, Emptiness, Mistake, all that kind of stuff, you would literally just lose to it. So it is, I think what could have been one of the best formats ever, like Necros Mirrors, are actually fantastic if you take Jin out of the equation. This format is actually basically ruined by Floodgates. Whether it's Jin on the side of Necros, or all the trap Floodgates, or Village of Spellcasters and all that by all the other decks in the format. Because Necros was so powerful that all the other decks had no other choice but to use those cards. Like it was genuinely understandable that if you didn't have the money for Necros and you were playing BA, Clifford, Shaddoll, or anything like that, you had to floodgate it. You didn't have another choice. Like you weren't beating Unicorn, Trishula, Valk, and all that. Like you couldn't beat it.
All right. Pepe, I think, is next. Correct.
Well, there is a I just wanted to mention it. There is a Necros format without Jin, actually. Like Necros gets continuously weakened a little bit in its consistency, and then they eventually ban Jin. And towards the end of 2015, this is the one where if I were to go back to replay Necros format, the release of, I don't know what the set is called, but it releases the clowns, the 4 mages. That is a phenomenal format to go back to because it just has Necros without Jin. And that mirror match is actually really cool. Burning Abyss is actually still viable, and there's like Shaddoll decks and Cosmo and all that kind of stuff, and Clownblade. So that format is actually, that's the good Necros format, I would say. That is the good Necros format. The other decks still rely on some amount of floodgates to beat Necros, but obviously you can side deck for that. So this is an actual good Necros format and definitely my favorite one.
You also have the clowns being played in basically a lot of different decks as well,
yeah,
right?
Shaddoll plays it because it's like now the best light monsters to send for Shaddoll Fusion.
Yep, you can send Trick Clown, special it back, or
Yep.
Juggler, add Hat Tricker, depending on how heavy of a clown engine you put in there, which is really strong.
Yep.
So yeah, like I think that's everything with Necros, right?
I think
Shockmaster in the OCG, I think, right? I think they were making Shockmaster.
I don't remember. I didn't remember looking at the OCG particularly often back then.
Because I think they were doing that with like Pepe, which I think is that's the next deck, right?
Pepe is the next
missing...
one. Yeah, the Pepe is happening now, and there's a relatively big ban list that takes care of a lot of the decks in this sort of format. Like Brio gets limited, Unicorn gets limited, BA gets like 1 Graph, 1 Mathematician. Clifford loses 2 Scouts. It goes to 1. Actually, it goes from 2 to 1. And Seer also gets semi-limited. So it's and Construct gets banned, and Sure it gets banned. So basically slaughtering Necros, Shaddoll, Clifford also loses towers, and then BA also is significantly weakened. So, but not BA is the one that I feel like got off the hook with that ban list, because we all know 2016 it does return. It's where this meme comes from that Dante is like unkillable, is because they only quote unquote got Graph and Seer hit on this list. So it actually has a resurgence in 2016. But before that happens, we obviously have the release of Pendulum, and Pepe and Draco Pal formats, with which it's probably my least favorite mechanic in Yu-Gi-Oh historically. So
Is it Breakers of Shadows that introduces the really broken performance pals like monkey boards? This was January 2016. Yeah, I'm getting that right.
I think it's end of 2015 already, but I might be wrong.
So the end of 2015, there's still I feel like I'm getting my dates mixed up here because I'm pretty sure Breakers of Shadows was early 2016, but I'm looking at format library and they have
They have it
board
listed as November 2015 Pepe format, and it's got monkey board as the picture. That's what threw me off.
Yeah, that doesn't really. That's not.
I don't know if that's accurate, but
that can't be accurate.
Either way, whether it's end of 2015 or beginning of 2016, you have the first. I know the first thing that comes out is the Magician like starter deck. I think that brings us like Oath Dragon and Time Star. No, Time Star.
Wisdom Eye Magician.
Wisdom Eye. That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah, and Skullcrow, Bad Joker, and all that. That deck was like fine. But then when Breakers of Shadow releases, it gets completely insane, right? Because you get like Performa Pal Sorcerer. Bosch also has Solemn Strike and Ariadne, which is like one of the main things that this deck can do going first is like search a bunch of Solemns, which is really painful to play into. Right? So I did not like early Pendulum format, to say the least. I think it's very, very close to one of the best decks relative to its time ever. And it was virtually unbeatable going second. We weren't even close to having the tools to deal with those kind of boards going second. So yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, like the synergies between the Pendulum is the most important thing to note here is that Pendulum is not the way you remember it today. You have to special summon into zones. You didn't need to do that. Back in the day, you were very much playing a deck that was designed and synergizes with destroying your own Pendulum scales, putting them into the extra deck, and then just bringing them all out with your Pendulum summon, and you don't need zones because Link Monsters aren't a thing. You can just Pendulum 5 every turn. So we talked about how insane Soul Charge was in 2014. They just made it a mechanic, and it was really absurd because Cliffort, while it was Pendulum summoning, it wasn't really taking advantage of the full capacity of...
It just didn't have a way to fill the extra deck, is the thing, right?
Yeah.
You would just normal summon your Cleaforts at a very slow pace, and by the time you could actually Pendulum summon, you would probably have an Emptiness face up. So, like, it wasn't really utilized by that deck. And now you would have cards that would just dump stuff into your extra deck, right? Whether it's Performa Pal Pendulum Sorcerer popping your scales, Wavering Eyes popping your scales, Wisdom Eye Magician popping itself, you just load up the extra deck, Pendulum summon everything, set up a crazy board with like Shockmaster or Solemn cards and all that kind of stuff, and have basically a guaranteed kill ready for next turn because you could Pendulum summon it all again. And it was very, very close to unwinnable for the player going second in that format.
And we had one of the fastest ban lists of all time. It was they called it the emergency list. It was 13 days after the release of Breakers of Shadow that they hit a bunch of cards. I think Plushfire got banned, right?
I think Plushfire got banned. Yeah.
Basically, it was all the low rarity cards, funnily enough. And this is
weird.
Where we start
Master
to
Duel
see...
behavior. It's Damage Juggler and Plushfire, actually, and Satellar Knight Ptolemaeus. And limits to Luster, Monkey Board, and Skullcrow Bat Joker. So, like, literal cards that have been out for not a long time immediately got hit super, super hard, still resulting in a format where the deck is very, very popular.
And arguably one of the best new player / budget player formats ever is we see probably the first, at least that I can remember at this point from before I started playing, the first time structure deck is a viable option. Monarch, Emperors of Darkness or something. Throwing 3 of those together, and I don't even think you needed much else outside of the structure deck. You just had a fully competitive Monarch deck, and fast forward a little bit to the Nationals of 2016. Eric Christensen wins the NAWCQ with extra deckless Monarch.
Yep.
And it's basically like 3 structure decks. It was really, really powerful. Yeah, I think Kuraz was your most expensive card, which wasn't in the structure deck. But yeah, Monarch was really powerful at this time because, Pepe was extremely insane, but it got a lot of consistency hits. And going second against a Monarch deck that just activates Domain of the Monarch, which is Scythe. It's a field spell if you control a tribute summon monster. It really is just that simple. And you could just sit on big Monarchs. There was a lot of cool plays with Aether and Erebus. Erebus could loop your opponent's hand or grave or field. You just non-targeting spin a card from one of those locations.
Yeah.
Aether could summon another Monarch from the deck, which bounces it to your hand in the end phase, that you can then use to summon on your opponent's turn, because Aether was a quick effect to tribute someone on your opponent's turn, so you could like Stormforth your opponent on their turn, which is insane to think about in hindsight. But yeah, Monarch becomes a very relevant and budget-friendly as well, most importantly, strategy during this period.
Absolutely. And it's worth pointing out that the Pendulum decks were still powerful, but they hit it really, really hard. So it was released in this insanely powerful state, and they toned it down to honestly a relatively balanced deck compared to the other decks relatively fast. But you got to give them credit where credit is due. Obviously, the cards were released in an insane like power level, but they turned it down relatively fast to a point where pendulums are playable in this format, definitely, but they are not. I wouldn't call them problematic. It's like you've got for this time you've got like Cosmo, Fire King Cosmo, Domain Monarch, Extra Deck Monarch, like Pendulum Magician decks and Burning Abyss Phantom Knight, all at relatively similar levels. So I think this one is actually, if you were gonna revisit like 2016 early days pendulum rules and all that, I think that format is actually a decent one to do it. Like I think that'd be a fine one to revisit and replay. And if there is anything out of this era that has Time Wizard potential, I would definitely think it'd be this one.
Yep. Next up, ABC around about August. It's crazy. Yeah, we had like a Monarch structure deck, and then we got an ABC structure deck.
Yeah, really, really good structures at the time. And it's also where my beloved Paleos release in Invasion of Vengeance. We get Toad and we get the Paleos. Augur set.
Yeah, it was a really good format as well because 3 decks, you may or may not have noticed, have become like kind of a staple of pretty fun formats where there's just 3 solid viable options with a little bit of rogue sprinkled in around them.
Yeah.
But I think it's very much like ABC is the most popular deck, at least, just because I assume because of its budget friendliness. You have Metal Foes, which is a new deck that's doing really well as well. Before Electromite, of course. Is a Metal Foes card, by the way. Did you know? And yeah, of course, as Joss mentioned, Paleozoic.
Yeah.
I think Totally Awesome was in that set as well, alongside the
Totally
Paleos,
Awesome
wasn't it?
is Invasion of Vengeance. I don't know
Yeah.
exactly where the Metal Foes happen. That is not. They might also be Invasion of
Yeah.
Vengeance, but
Yeah, Lightsworn was also a deck if you could afford it. Minerva was a prize card, and you could, buy your way into playing what is essentially a rank 4 spam deck. It's kind of like what the OCG had as Clown Blades. You're, using a rank 4 to make like Gigabyte. To get King of the Pharaoh Imps to add Gigabyte, which detaches like a clown which floats.
it was
so you
just
special
different
summon-
avenues of rank 4 spam. Whether you'd always have to decide like, do I make Minerva here? Do I make King of the Pharaoh Imps here? Do I whatever? You just spam a bunch of rank 4s and then like end it with whichever one was good in the matchup. Like for some matchups it was like Dweller. For other matchups it was a different one. Like if you really wanted to flex, you could like Minerva and then summon like Giant Hand or something. But I don't know if anyone had that like access to both cards. But
Yep. So it was a good format. I don't think there's too much to say about it.
yeah, I would prefer the one prior to it, I think, in general, but it's also a solid one, specifically because obviously I love the Paleozoic deck that happened and came out at the time. Never a big fan of ABC. Conceptually, it always felt like a very all-in type of thing. If you resolve your combo, you win. If you can't, then tough luck. But it was definitely like a strong deck at the time. And then we get what is the set called? The Raging Tempest?
Yeah.
Zodiacs and Grass.
This is the First big tier 0 in a long time. I think the first YCS of Zoo, there is...
if you ignore the Pepe month, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think YCS Atlanta, no, Sydney was the first Pepe event for that one.
Yeah, that one
So
was
there was a
obliterated by Pendulum, I think. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's
but I don't think it was 32 out of 32. But Zoo,
okay, yeah.
but it's I mentioned that, I'm not trying to actually, but Zoo literally gets 32 out of 32,
Who does it? I
100%
don't actually
of top
remember
card.
this. Okay, is
Yes,
it like in the US?
it's a US event, yeah. That gets
But it's like it's during the it's Draco Zoo format, right? Where it's like not all pure Zodiacs. There's like Draco Zoo in there as well, I think.
Draco cards are a little bit later, are they not?
Yeah, but I think
In
the
27?
32 out of 32 is also a little bit later. I don't think it's in this format. But correct me if I'm wrong, chat. But I think that happens during the very first event. Okay, then my bad. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
So
Zodiac cards are just insane for at the time. Nowadays, honestly, not even that crazy outside of Rat Pier. Like in modern, is Trident still banned in the TCG?
TCG, yep.
Insane behavior. Anyways, outside of Rat Pier and Broad Bull, I think in modern days the Zodiacs don't seem that great anymore because it's just basically a bunch of normal summons that allow you to stack a bunch of Xyz on top of each other and get different effects. The best ones being Broad Bull to search a Beast Warrior and Dryden to pop a face-up card. And then Rat Pier, if it was used as a material, allowed you to detach one to summon more Rat Piers from the deck. So you would basically, out of one Rat Pier, you would get at least a Dryden at the end and any rank 4 of your choosing by using the other two Rat Piers at the end, right? And then Norden with fusion sub combos enabled you to go a little bit deeper if you wanted to do that. But that was basically the idea of Zodiac. It was just a really efficient deck where all of your monsters, it was so hyper consistent because all of your monsters would do the same thing essentially. They would get you to that Broad Bull +1 Trident, which is interruption and all that kind of stuff. It could use Tenki, it could use Barrage as an extender, and it could just run a solid. It's like the first example of a deck that's just good because it's got solid 1-card combos. They're not really interesting combos. It's just you're stacking a bunch of Exceeds on top of each other, but you've got a whole lot of non-engine next to it. It's in that way, it's a very modern tier 0 deck, right? Because it's just basically the 2017 version of like, I don't know, Invoked or Snake Eye or whatever, right? Because it's just like 1-card combos paired with the best non-engine for the format.
I think one card that we glossed over from Invasion Vengeance was Dimensional Barrier, which is a super important relevant card that you played in Zodiac that you could draw into because of just how powerful your draw power was. Kind of made the mirror match a little bit annoying sometimes, but
I will say, I think D-Barrier at this time is less annoying than it is today because the game was not over in one turn. As good as Zodiac was and as consistent as it was, it couldn't put out 8,000 damage in one turn. So skipping one turn wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah. A little bit about the grass decks, I suppose. That grass looks greener. Lawn mowing, if anyone remembers the original. Gosh, it took me a while to drop that. But yeah, it's the first time that you've ever really been incentivized to think about your deck's card count. We're in a time of Yu-Gi-Oh where it's very strict in its I guess card count, right? I think it was especially popularized by Patrick Hoban. If you play less cards, you'll see your best cards more. It's a very simple principle. It's a very basic concept, but we were kind of really like, it was very rare for people to play more than 40. However, Grass Looks Greener wanted you to play more than 40 cards, which is a strange paradox. But people did it anyway, and well, I think some of the first iterations of Grass was, I think Zoonoid was the first deck, right? Because you're a singular Rat Pier, which could be got to with Terror Top. It could through MX Saber Invoker or Barrage or any Zodiac.
Or just normal.
Well, not any Zodiac. You needed Rat Pier specifically, right, to get to the second rank 4. And because they're Beast Warriors, you could go into Kagatsuchi, a Bujin monster, funnily enough, and you can mill 5 from the top of your deck, get more Infernoids into the graveyard, or just draw the grass. So there's a lot of synergy between these two decks.
So it was basically I do think this format, because I've seen some people or I've heard some people talk about this format and felt like it wasn't great. I personally loved this format, but that's also because of the deck that I played. But because basically it was like Zodiac was this really hyper consistent, usually 40 card deck that could only really be beaten if like one of the 60 card grass decks would actually draw grass, which at the time was guaranteed to resolve because there was no Ash Blossom yet. And so people would even go the extra mile to play cards like Left Arm Offering because, well, sacrificing your entire hand wasn't that big of a cost if you knew the grass was going to resolve. Obviously, nowadays, even if grass was legal, you wouldn't really do that anymore because if your opponent has an Ash Blossom, you lose instantly. So there were some decks that literally went all in on grass, which was the one way you could overpower Zodiac is by activating grass, milling 20 cards, and then, well, it doesn't matter how efficient your opponent's normal summon was if you're just milling like 10 Infernoids or something. Or like there was like, I think some Lightsworn decks as well. And what ended up being, in my opinion, the best deck of the format, or what I won YCS Prague with, was Paleos, but I just turned it into a 60 card deck. Well, I say but it was more of a team effort. There was like a lot of people involved in it, and the cool thing about Paleo Frogs is that it's a 60 card deck. So all of the decks that go all in on resolving grass, they don't actually get to use the grass at all because you have the same number of cards in the deck. And
I think Ash Blossom is legal at this point as well, right?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
2017.
This is 20. It comes out slightly after. Like YCS Prague, there was no Ash.
Okay.
But Paleo was like the only deck I think in the format. Well, I mean, you probably could have found something else, but the only viable deck that actually beat Zodiac, because the one thing that Zodiac did not have at all is like interaction with back row. Because Dryden can only pop face-up cards. Like that deck would end on Dryden, a couple sets, maybe a Daigusto Emerald or something, and you would just set some cards and they couldn't do anything to it. They had no way to even out a Mirror Force. Like my deck played 5 copies of Mirror Force with like Quaking and OG-ass Mirror Force, because the deck couldn't do anything to it. And you would just sit on Paleos, eventually make Toads, float into Dupe Frogs, and
don't forget, your Paleos are unaffected by monsters.
Yeah,
I wonder how many people tried to try and pop your Opabinio.
Could not do anything to Paleos. And so Paleo beat Zodiac, and it also beat other 60 card decks because Paleo wasn't reliant on grass in the same way that they were. So it's a really wonderful solution looking back at that format.
Yeah, you can like go into your Left Arm Offering, Grasp, and if you didn't draw those, like your deck was kind of bad.
Yeah.
With the like Lightsworn Zombie Pile, I think that was kind of one of the popular grass decks around about that time. Next part of this, I think, is Zoo Draco around like Maximum Crisis.
Is that when
where
Masterpiece Paleo goes from like the best deck in the format to 0% viability because Masterpiece destroys it. Masterpiece, like they can easily make it unaffected by traps. It's a quick effect pop that chain blocks Paleos and pops your back row. Paleo goes from being this wonderful solution to the format to completely unplayable, which is why I don't have very cool, very fond memories of this period of time. Like it's probably a fine format. I was just sad that Paleo wasn't playable anymore. But it's basically now a triangle of Zodiac, True Draco, Zodiac, and pure True Draco, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Metalfoes was like somewhat viable there, right? Like with Draco
like
Metalfoes,
True Draco Metalfoes. Yeah, I guess there's still some 60 card variations running around. Realistically, I think those are more like tier 2 decks, but yeah.
So Masterpiece is one of the I think like we didn't talk too much about it, but Apocryphal Towers was very relevant at the 2015 Nationals. It was very different for us in Europe because we didn't have an out to it, whereas in America they had Diamond Crab King, which I think was like a jump promo.
Yeah,
which, by the way, like
3k attack, right?
Yeah, so you could just crash into the towers. So that was like, probably, as the name implies, like the first towers monster. And now we're getting like a second version, which is like in some ways better, some ways worse, because it's not completely unaffected by everything. You have to choose. So you could tribute, the whole gimmick of the Draco cards, you can tribute a spell or your traps to summon it, which is kind of crazy to think about. But typically, depending on the matchup, blind, it was very safe to just make it unaffected by spells and monsters.
Mhm.
But it was a bit of a mind game. There was like situations where actually making it unaffected by traps and monsters was better because the True Draco traps
In the True Draco
pop
Mirror
monsters.
match, yeah, in the True Draco Mirror, the best one was to make it unaffected by traps and monsters, because then it couldn't get popped by something like Trident, but it also couldn't get popped by True Draco traps, which destroy monsters.
Yeah, so it's really format warping because if your deck doesn't have an out to masterpiece, it's not playable.
Yeah.
And that really is like what you kind of mentioned about Paleozoic, because it really was like just the epitome of boss monster.
Yeah.
So powerful that I'm just wondering maybe even if it came back today, if it would be too strong.
I don't
It's
think it'd be too strong, but it would definitely be
something to
something
think about
worth
at
looking
least.
into, I guess, in
Yeah.
certain formats. It's one of those discussions where people ask like, could this come back? And my answer is like, probably, but I'm not sure if I want it. Because like,
Mhm.
what's the possible outcomes? Either it's irrelevant and then it doesn't matter, or it's still powerful and I don't really want to play against it. But
Uh, and then I think we have Master Rule 4 later in the
Mhm.
year. Yay. This is the introduction of
Your
link
favorite master
summoning.
rule.
So it's really funny looking back at the time because so many content creators and stuff were making videos about how, like, oh, this is Konami's way of slowing down the game because, as
Yeah,
you've noticed, the game is getting really powerful at this point, right? We
yeah.
we just had full power Pepe into Zoo. Like, those are some really, really strong decks that
I
would
will say
be.
it's crazy from today's perspective that people were complaining about the speed of the game at this point,
Yeah.
where I'm just like, from today's perspective, I'm like, hey, wait, this is fine, yo. What are we complaining about? Like, the opponent passes on Emerald plus Trident and sets 2 cards. I'm like, yeah, let me play that format.
So there was an iteration of Master 04, which some people might not know for those of you who started maybe around 2020 onwards.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, when they made Link monsters, you could only summon any extra deck monster into a zone of Link monster points to, or your singular EMZ. So Synchro spam decks, Xe spam decks,
All
Fusion
dead.
spam decks, all of them just died overnight.
Yeah.
There was so much talk about Mermel being the best deck. That's how clueless we were as to the situation that was unfolding with Master of 4. Because, hey, Mermels don't use an extra deck. You summon a Gaios, and that's good enough. Oh boy, did we not know any better. So the logic in theory was that, well, they want you to only use the extra deck into these specific zones, therefore the game is slowing down, etc., etc.
Yeah, I will say I think the idea behind it was fair. Or like, I understand where they were coming from. Because extra deck usage, I mean, if you look at extra deck usage today, I would definitely say it's gotten out of hand somewhere along the lines. I think that's a fair thing to say, that the extra deck is being used very, very extensively at the moment. And this is something that they wanted to counteract, I think. It's funny to think about the fact that they were kind of aware of it in 2017 and still, you know, made it happen this way. But no.
Yeah, so in 2020 they removed that rule, thankfully. Gosh, what a terrible idea that was. But it definitely forced us to play Link decks, which initially we didn't play any Link deck,
Yeah, like,
really.
well, initially it didn't really work because whenever a new extra deck summoning mechanic is released, it's just not that powerful usually. Like, they're like solid cards, but nothing to build a deck around. So it was like, okay, well, we'll throw a Mrs. Radiant into our Zodiac decks and call it a day, right? If we have enough bodies, we can just make the Mrs. Radiant and then combo under it. Right? I remember still playing some Paleo decks then and just hoping to not play into True Draco. And if I was popping off, I would either make one Toad and then I wouldn't care, or I would make what's the Mistar Boy thingy? Yeah. And then I was able to make 2 Toads under that, Opabinia and Toad. And like, basically we were trying to ignore it and still just play good decks that weren't Link decks until we get obviously really powerful Link monsters like Spiral Double Helix, which is the first of many tier 0 formats during Link era. It really feels like now that they are giving us powerful Link monsters is a period in time where they needed to learn a thing or two about how to balance cards that can be made with anything on the board, like even tokens, right? Like, that is definitely, I think I think it's fair to say they were not aware of how broken that mechanic was going to be, I think. Or they did it intentionally, which is also crazy. But yeah.
Spiral is like a kind of like a neat like combo deck. It sort of like focuses on like some synchro plays. I think Ancient Fairy Dragon was like a huge part of it. And then they printed Double Helix, which might be the single most powerful like support card for a deck ever in history. That's like a debate you could argue. You know, maybe the Gen X Link one is like broken in terms of the context of Gen X. Who knows? But it's such a just deck changing card for how powerful Double Helix is. To then summon your master plan from your deck, and then just do like a bunch of ridiculous combos that really does end on just an unbreakable board of like, I mean, was Apollosa legal at the time? I don't
No,
think
there was no
so.
Appaloosa. But you do say I will give it one piece of credit, which is the fact that Spiral format, even though it was definitely a tier 0 format and everyone was playing Spiral, there's definitely a time where people would go second on purpose with Spiral decks, right? There was go second Spiral and go first Spiral, and there was a debate between which of the two is better. And sometimes you would actually be able to play like Board Breaker Spiral. I think it's specifically after the release of like Evenly Matched and such, or Cherries as well, right? Cherries was a big
Evenly
card
Matched.
in the Spiral mirror because of how good Double Helix was. If you lost it, your deck kind of sucked. So there was this movement of, hey, I'm gonna go second actually, and I think that is the one positive thing you gotta give this format is like going first was not as auto win as in some other tier 0 formats, but still it was going first with Spiral or going second with Spiral, like that. You know, pick your poison, right? It's Spiral no matter what.
Winter Cherries is a card that we didn't mention in the previous years, but it is seeing a lot of play throughout this kind of period of the game where you could cherries like all
I
of
mean,
your
it releases
opponents
in
like
literally 2017 or 16, I think, during
it's the start of
ABC.
the year though, right?
I think it was there during ABC format, I want to say.
Yeah, it was definitely like in 2016 because I remember you could like play it against like PK Fire, I think if you really wanted to, but it was popular against ABC. Just
Yeah.
banishing all of your Buster Dragons.
Yeah.
Um, is like I think one of the first uses we see of it, and as you mentioned, Spiral does kind of popularize it in the mirror match.
Yep. Exactly.
All right, and then the next tier 0 after Spiral, I think, is Magicians with Electromite.
Is that the Pendulum FTK one?
Yeah, triple Electromite. Go.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
um, so there isn't really much to say here, but 2018 really is this absurd era of
look what
Yu-Gi-Oh.
the formats we're looking at right now on Format Library are Magician FTK, then Goki, and then Danger FTK.
And prior to that is Spiral tier 0. So
Yeah.
like this is why
early Link era is something else.
I really kind of mentally checked out of the game here. I think I just played like anti-meta Draco for like 6 months. My streams back then were crazy. It was just like a daily podcast with like background like visuals of like stun Draco gameplay. It was such a cursed period of time for Yu-Gi-Oh.
I will say the one positive thing for me towards the end of the format was the Danger FTK was actually kind of fun to play yourself.
I mean, all of these are fun, I think, as long as you're not the opponent.
Well, kind of like the thing with Danger FTK was it was the first time where like you would play an FTK deck that was actually like going second. Your plan wasn't to just do the FTK and die to a single interruption. It actually had like a profound game plan going second of just like summoning dangers and like summoning different nightmare links into your opponent's board and all that. And the only thing that was like keeping this format from being completely insane was the fact that the deck wasn't, for some reason, wasn't that popular. Right? There was like people were doing like Thunder Dragon stuff.
I think it was discovered like
Sky
kind
Striker.
of late.
Yeah.
I think it was because it was discovered kind of late.
Oh yeah, I remember going to YCS London and learning about it on the Friday. I was gonna play my Thunder Dragon deck, and then on the Friday, people were like, "Yo, you're of Danger FTK." I was like, "No, what's that?" And then I had to go find the cards for it. Yeah.
I think it might have been like Jeff or Max, who like kind of originated it, and then it kind of like spread around, and here we are now. So maybe that's how that got out there. But yeah, 2018, it was a roller coaster of FTKs. There isn't really much to say. Like Firewall Dragon is at its absolute peak. It's just ridiculous. A Gumblar Dragon was a huge part of the Goki strategy. It won the European Championship. Without Gumblar, it did thankfully get banned relatively early, but we are seeing like so
I
much
don't
build
think
aboard.
Gumblar was banned for Euros, was it? I think it was just not
Was
out
it?
for us.
Maybe. Hmm.
I don't know.
Uh,
Like there was some cards that were really relevant that were released in different times for EU and NA, like Summon Sorceress, Link Karibo,
yeah,
both
that was really
being jump
annoying.
promos. So there's weird timings in this format. I don't know exactly.
It's hilarious because this is kind of where like EU and NA start mixing a lot. I think I want to say like I don't really remember too many people like constantly going to events across the continents, but I think there's the World's Point system is in this introduced into this period, right?
The World's Points were in place for a while at this point. 2017 is the first year that they happen. But yes, they exist. And I think
2017 for the
2018
2018 season,
2018 is a
right?
year where you can't collect points overseas anymore.
Ah,
So it
okay.
couldn't be that. I don't know. Maybe it's
Well,
just in general traveling became it did become more quote unquote meta in those years. Yeah, there's been like people like Billy Brake who traveled in 2017 and some others before that, but in like 2017, 18, 19, there's definitely it started where a lot of people would regularly come over. Yeah.
it was interesting because you mentioned the differences in the card pools. So like you could play like Goki at one event and then you'd like learn new combos for like American Goki.
Yeah,
It's
I remember I
it's
actually
an
went to
interesting
an American
dynamic.
YCS playing Goki, and it was different because Summon Sorcerers and Link Karibo, I think. So yeah, it was definitely something to get used to. I lost the
Um
I last round on the bubble. I lost the dice roll in the mirror match, so I didn't top. That was pretty cool. I don't know why I went in that format specifically. It was pretty stupid.
and then 2019 somehow weirdly like feels like kind of a soft reset of the game, but
Yeah,
there's like the game is significantly slowed down and
yeah,
there's a ban list that hits a bunch of stuff.
we're miraculously, I don't know, getting our shit together, I suppose, after what 2018 was. And we're releasing and tuning decks a little bit more to the point where they're fine, like Orcust being a link centered deck that locks you into darks from the extra deck. Sky Striker already existing in 2018, but being a control style deck that didn't really work because of Goki and Danger decks just being faster. Thunder Dragon being a solid strategy. So like basically toss, right? Salamangreat releasing in a pretty cool state. So yeah, toss format. If you ever want to play a link format, don't go to 2018. Go to 2019 for
Yeah.
for your own mental health sake. Do not go to
It's
2018.
and it's very early 2019 as well. That Striker is like meta, and then we get the Salamangreat as you mentioned. But again, really cool. It's a structure deck. 3 Soul Burner structure decks, and you did have to buy Sunlight Wolf, but I think it was
Yeah.
a rare. It's a
Yeah,
very
it was
expensive
still
rare, but it
like
was a rare nonetheless.
$10 because it was the only card that was expensive for the deck, but still overall the deck was relatively budget, barring Phantasme, which obviously Phantasme in a world where there's still the old Link rules, where basically every deck is kind of forced into playing Links. Phantasme is almost a main deck staple at this point. So you'd still need the Phantasmes usually, but other than that, the Salamangreat core was very affordable.
What was the Prank Kids YCS by Dinkabui? Was that late 2018 or was that in 2019?
That was the one that I played the slash draw FTK in, so it must have been 2018.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah, so I mentioned that because in 2019, like the meta really kind of like Striker Salad, but there's a lot of like stuff just thrown in.
Yeah.
Like there's like Altergeist is like still like
Mhm.
kind of viable. There's Invoked. We didn't talk about that too much, but Invoked variations, different types of engines you can throw into that. That's doing really
Mhm.
well. So there's like best decks, but there's also like plenty of like budget slash rogue options. And of course, as mentioned, Salamangreat was a structure deck.
Yeah.
There was like shout out to that German kid that I forgot his name of, but he top 8'd, I think, nationals or something that year using like 3 structures, the Sunlight Wolf, and like couldn't afford Phantasmes because they were very expensive at the time. I think it
Yeah.
was just like Veilers instead or something, and managed to get top 8. So
Yeah.
big shout outs to him.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most important decks to talk about in this period is Thunder Dragon.
Yeah, the kind of the Crusadia combo. It's basically guard dragons, right? That make the majority of this deck powerful. The Thunder Dragons were mostly just a bonus to add a Colossus or two to your end board. But that is like the combo deck in the equation.
I think Brilliant Fusion's still legal as well, right?
You can play Brilliant Fusion, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Well, I remember like Jesse Bowden, I think, played something like this. You could like Brilliant Fusion, like send Snow.
Yeah, that's
and then, like-
2018 Thunder Dragon though, because Snow is
Oh,
banned
okay.
in
All right.
2019.
Okay. Okay. So it's a little more fair. All right.
So Snow is banned. Soul Charge gets banned in the January ban list, I think. So Grinder
only took 4
Golem.
years.
Yeah.
Ooh, Grinder Golem.
Yeah.
That's it was a good year. Until Luna Knight, I think, kind of breaks that with shout outs to Vlad for coming up with that annoying strategy. But there was a rank 4 monster that existed called Azathoth, which was also played, I think, in the Danger FTK.
Yeah.
Funnily enough.
Oh god, I forgot about Azathoth. Dude, thank you for reminding me. Not.
So Azathoth is like a rank 4. Well, you go into it with like
Nyarla
or
is the
something,
rank 4. Azathoth's the
And
rank
it-
5.
and then you rank up into it just
Yep.
by like, I think it's just the Zodiac, and
Yep.
then it doesn't even activate. It just says your opponent can activate monsters for this turn.
It's like Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. Like it doesn't activate, it just applies its effect when it's summoned. So your opponent can't Veiler it or something. So literally
the
at the
only-
time, that's one of the most incredible things about the Danger FTK is if you could put 2 level 4s on the board, you made Azathoth, which at that point meant the only card your opponent could even realistically have in the entire card pool of Yu-Gi-Oh! To interact with you with infinite impermanence.
Yeah, and it was just imperm or bust.
Yeah.
And then they could
Even
boost,
that you could play around by giving them a card with Summon Sorceress, which was like, well, am I going to imperm the Summon Sorceress now and still get FTK'd? Or they're just going to give me a monster and I can't use imperm anymore. So, yeah.
Or you could like get impermed on your firewall and then like make unicorn, spin it back, and then resummon it. Like if your hand was insane enough, you could do that.
So yeah, Azathoth was insane. Yeah.
But yeah, Lunalights were taking advantage of like Azathoth and then going into Link plays.
Mhm.
What did you really do? Was there like Orcus cards thrown in there?
It was a Lunalight Orcus deck, I think. That
Okay,
one, at least
yeah.
that one YCS in Europe, I think it was YCS Ghent, was won by Lunalight Orcus, where you would just like summon Azathoth, Lunalight, spam some bodies, turn it into Orcus combos, put some extra stuff next to it maybe, because you
Yeah.
got extra bodies from the Lunalights.
And
Yeah,
don't
that was
forget how
basically it.
Orcust worked back in this day. This was the period of time where we had Nightmare Mermaid, which was
Yeah.
literally any 2 monsters made a nightmare, make mermaid. For those of you who missed that really fun, enjoyable part of Yu-Gi-Oh, we're getting it again.
Infinite Forbidden.
You guys, I have a set for you guys. Let me tell you about Infinite Forbidden. It's something. So Nightmare Mermaid is I think banned at some point in the summer because I think the later 2019 Orcus deck doesn't have Mermaid, right?
I
Or do they still have it?
am checking right now. Orcus format 2019. Mermaid
some
is
point
banned.
later-
Yeah, Mermaid is banned, but Orcus is still viable.
And I think there's like a second ban list after Nationals or something, and then Orcus kind of basically just becomes the best deck. So I don't know, like when people play TOS format, I don't know which list they pick.
Yeah, I wonder
but-
that too. I don't know actually. I would think the one towards the end of the year was the most balanced one. The YCS
Really?
London engage into accident one.
That was an incident.
Yeah, I think that
Um,
one's probably the one that you would go back to because it has like
Really?
Orcus without Mermaid. I'm pretty sure Sky Striker is viable. Salad.
Because I just remember
is
that those
fine.
YCSs being very kind of dominated by Striker Orcust, which is kind of where people
Yeah.
shove the cards into now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
you play Engage like in Orcust, and there's just so many like spells that it usually works.
It's a relatively late discovery to the format, I think, but once it's been discovered, it's very dominant. So maybe looking back at the format now, most people will be playing this deck. But back in the day, it was relatively diverse, I think. There was even people still playing like Trickstar leftovers from 2018. People still trying to make like Thunder Dragon decks work without like the Guard Dragons and all that kind of stuff. So I think historically it was a diverse format. I don't know how diverse it really is if you go back to it now.
I don't understand. Like, it's crazy to me that people like were playing in a format with Gumblar and Goki and Summon Sork, and they were just like, "I'm gonna summon Candina." Didn't mention that, but you know, if that was a deck that was in the finals of the European Championship with, you know, summon a Trickstar, I guess.
That's
You
crazy.
know.
You would just give him a win like that.
Yeah, so 2020 is a fantastic year for Yu-Gi-Oh! We see one of the best decks ever released, one of the healthiest decks for the game.
Mm-hmm.
Was
Mm-hmm.
Adamancipator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we
Mm-hmm.
are you okay there? Is this like a
No, I'm
buzzing
just
noise?
thinking how good of a timing they picked for COVID, like by like globally speaking.
Who picked the time for this?
I don't know, but it was a good timing.
So unfortunately, Adamancipator might be the best deck of all time to not like top an official event. I think. I'm not sure. Maybe we had like official remote duels. Oh, there was the Invitational that Team Samurai won with Misk. Uh, I don't know if it's 2020 or if it's 2019 where Dinos get their best results. But
I don't think it's 19. It's somewhere during COVID, I think.
okay, well, I think that's really cool because you know, it was a structure deck. A little bit out of print at this point because I think Dino Smasher Fury was in 2017 or 18.
Mm.
But yeah, there was like 2020 is where we get the Secrets of Eternity or Forces. No, that's so many. What was the
Which set are you referring to? Like which cards?
Adamancipator, and then the deck build pack with Eldritch. One of those
The
Secret Slayers.
Secret Slayers is Eldritch, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So wait, is that early 2020?
Mid 2020, I think.
Oh, is it? Okay. So early 2020 we have
Early
Rocket.
2020 is the one where it's Shaddoll and stuff, like YCS Utrecht. Was won by Salad.
Into 2020. Okay. Was there Dragon
That was
Link?
2020. That was like February 2020.
Did we have Dragon Link stuff?
I maybe. I just summoned
2020 is
Winda.
such a weird year. There were Spyros as well? They were winning with Magician Souls? Wow, I don't remember that format. Did you? Oh, I don't think you were around for that format, right?
No, I was around for that one, but then I left.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you had a little holiday. What was the meta?
Well, I
I
played
generally don't
Shaddoll.
remember.
It was like Shaddoll, and Shaddoll invoked literally to have more copies of like fusion spells. And it was like some Spiral, I think. Salamangreat was okay, I want to say.
True King Dino, Scrap Spyro, Extrav Spyro. Oh Jesus, do you remember that deck? Apollousa was not a cheap card at this point. It was not reprinted or anything, and some people managed to discover. I think it may have been like Herman or something was among those people who like found out that you could just play Extravagance and Spiral, which meant that you had to play 3 copies of Apollousa.
And it was for like Lightning Storm also just came out. That I remember that. Like that was exactly before YCS Utrecht.
Yeah, so top 64 of Utrecht is not dominate, is 13 Spiral, 10 Salamangreat, 8 Altergeist, 6 Invoke Shaddoll, 5 Dino. There's a good mix of decks, I think.
It like the format probably is fine looking back at it pre-COVID. Like we're probably in a fine spot. Like Winda is a problem, but
well, at some point along the line, we get the deck build pack, which includes Eldritch. It includes Rika, which absolutely sucked and was terrible.
Still is.
Ironically, ended up becoming. What was
that didn't change.
What was the third archetype in that set?
Well, I wouldn't remember. I wouldn't know.
It was vampires. Chat, remind us what the third deck in there. So yeah, there was Rika's, there was Eldritch. Wait, Adamancipator was in. Oh, it was in that pack. Okay, cool. Yeah, so Adamancipator is really powerful deck. It's very based, as Josh just mentioned. But it really takes advantage of some of the crazy link power that was offered at the time. So you had Halka Fibrax legal, and you had Link Cross legal. That was just disgusting because Halka Fibrax summon a tuner, make Link Cross, get 2 tokens, synchro with the tokens, and then, you know, the world's your oyster. There's Union Carrier, which is legal at the time as well. So all of these problematic link monsters that have basically all been banned at this point, they're all legal at this stage of Yu-Gi-Oh.
Good time to not be playing.
It's a very good time to have a global pandemic. Let's be honest.
So yeah, we got Adamantipator format into Infernoble format, as it's called here on the site. So it doesn't really get better with like hand looping with smoke grenade and all that kind of stuff, and summoning Omni negates, and all that.
Yeah.
Virtual
Virtual
World with
World is
BFD is the one that follows it. So
nice.
yeah, 2020 kind of feels like a 2018 all over again. Like after 2019, they kind of like saved it, and then they just like, oh wait, well, let's do that again.
I just remember how like ridiculous it was to play against the combo versions of like Eldritch and stuff. So you could put like some tuner extenders in your deck, and you could like just do like Hulk Faggoth just by itself just made Savage Dragon plus Herald, I think, and
Yeah.
then you also just had like a bunch of draws for some reason. I can't remember. Was it like Librarian maybe? I don't know. Yeah, I think like a couple of cards, and then you could like just set 4. It was just really annoying. Because I think Jet Synchron was legal, then it got banned, and it came back around this format as well. COVID makes the timelines kind of weird. There was a lot of online tournaments. I think Luxury was carrying quite hard. MBT, I think, was also hosting I can't remember what he called them, but yeah, that was really the only way to play the game back then. I think eventually we got like 1 or 2 remote events. I think I actually still have the VOD on my YouTube channel at some point. I think me and Darren actually hosted a YCS remotely. That was done on Discord. So not a great time for Yu-Gi-Oh, or for the world really.
I mean, yeah, they did try their best. I feel like to kind of make it work throughout those years. I obviously didn't play much or at all. I didn't follow the game that much during that time. I came back in 2022. But looking back at it, I think it is impressive that the game managed to get through that period as well as it did, I feel like.
I think it's very impressive, isn't it?
Like in general, I have that feeling sometimes. Like this is the one thing I multiple times throughout this podcast, I thought to myself like, wow, if we got through that format, we're also gonna get through Snake Eyes. Like fine, you know, like if Yu-Gi-Oh didn't die during Spiral into Magician into Goki into Danger FTK, then surely we're gonna survive Snake Eye into Fiendsmith. But and 2020 is kind of the same. Like we survived Adamantipator into Infernoble into VFD Virtual World, so we're gonna be fine.
Honestly, the irony is that during those like multiple FTK into FTK formats, these tier 0 style insane build-a-boards, you're not playing the game formats of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh was breaking records. Just to give you some social cultural context, the events in I think NAWCQ had the biggest NAWCQ of all time in 2018. We had the biggest EUWCQ. I think we had the biggest YCS of all time ever, apart from the ridiculous Long Beach one that was somehow 4,000 people. Like,
you mean
there were
at the
numbers.
time? Because I'm pretty sure nowadays they even got bigger.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
There are definitely
European YCSs have been growing ever since. Like they haven't really.
Yeah, I think American ones have dipped a little bit recently, but during that time, records were being broken across the board. YCSs in both regions, WCQs in both regions, which is crazy because like the formats were terrible. So I don't know. Maybe it's not, like
I think there's more to Yu-Gi-Oh than just how good is the current format. I feel like it's really just that, you know, like people play Yu-Gi-Oh almost regardless of the format. You know, they'll live through it with the good and the bad times, I think is the main takeaway, because there's good times and there's bad times, and without experiencing the bad times we won't know to really cherish the good ones and the good formats we're having. I feel like it's just part of a long-term hobby or a long-time hobby like this. Well, yeah,
I try to think of it as well in terms of like the global context, because maybe it's like, well, I couldn't really go to events in like 2013, like some of 2014. I was kind of like a poor student, so like maybe it's a case of like, well, the people who were playing the game kind of grew up and got some jobs and could afford to do stuff in 2018. Maybe
that
around
is
about that
100% a thing that like the community is growing with the game. Obviously, I'm always happy to see young people pick up the game, but I think the majority of the game's player base is like a little bit older than that, and kind of growing into that position where they can maybe afford to travel to events more, or even maybe afford to pay more on a deck. Like, which is maybe why something like, well, the prices of the Snake Eye deck were outrageous, but it didn't kill the game because people actually, they weren't happy about it, but they were able to. At least some of them, obviously, not everyone, but the fortunate ones were able to afford it. They weren't happy about it, but they were able to, right?
The
So
children have adult money now. So yeah, that's kind of glossing a little bit over 2020 because I mean, not really much can happen during a pandemic, and
yeah,
kind of same
I
with
also just can't
2021.
add too much to this discussion. I followed coverages a little bit. I watched, but this is I think it's 2021. I watched Raf win a remote YCS with Tri Brigade Zoo. I think this is like where this probably the better half of the COVID format 2021, where you got Dragon Link, Tri Brigade Zoo, Bird Up, like Lyrilusk. Still formats with flaws, but I feel like way more balanced than what happened in 2020.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note here as well, like the 2021 era of if you played the start of Mastodon, you'll probably be quite familiar with 2021 format. It was very similar in a lot of regards.
Yeah,
Like Tri Brigade Zoo was like the best deck for a while.
yeah.
Um, there was some Drytron gameplay. I don't even remember where the Drytron was, chat. I'm gonna be honest with you. It was such a weird time, but yeah, 2021 there was like more dominance of Dragon Link goes through like multiple different iterations at this point.
Yeah.
Because they had like Union Carrier at some point. There was like crazy Hulk lines. There was
Yeah.
the Rose Dragon. Baron was involved at some point, and then I think it gets a couple of nerfs, but it's like still around. So Dragon Link is there. It's doing good. And Tri Brigade Zoo alongside like the Zodiac cards is really what makes it really powerful as well because if you did get hit on your tri plays, you could go into I think Barrage is legal, and then you could just go into like an extender for a Ferrogeet or just make a Dryden
Yeah,
or
Barrage
Zeus
was
going
definitely
second.
legal and it was moving. That's why I remember. It was legal. Has to have been legal.
Forgetting Seal's tidying pass. Yeah, I guess like Dragon Maids are also too. Drytron was released in late 2020. Okay, so that would have been around about like where Virtual World is like
Yeah.
in the
Drytron is
meta.
like a thing throughout that entire thing. Yeah, and I was just I'm glad you said it because I was wondering why why I felt like I remembered this format. It's because it is early Master Duel, right? Because Master Duel released in 2022, but with like a delay in card pool that we still have of like a couple months. And that is why I remember all those decks because I played with that in Master Duel. Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. And then we've got like a bird up format here in the latter part of 2021.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of like what these decks actually were because I think Virtual World is it must have had VFD banned at this point, surely. Yeah, I think Virtual World is playable, but it doesn't have VFD.
VFD's
Eldritch is still
banned.
around.
VFD's banned. Sword Soul is out towards the end of
Uh,
2021.
yes, which is in the same set as DPE, which I think Verte is legal at the time. So this is where the whole make Verte meme comes from, and a
Yep.
lot of decks could just play the game or get stopped at some point. You just combine two effect monsters, make a Verte, and you could just get a free DP.
Very
as part
similar
of
to
your
the
combo.
Nightmare Mermaid incident. So if you've been a fan of Make Verte and Pass or still combo, you're gonna like the Infinite Forbidden once again.
Yeah, it's a really like pivotal card as well because I think prior to this we were actually playing with Dragoon, which was fairly popular. It was like arguably the best deck in OCG for a while,
Mhm.
because you could just summon an invoked monster, and then make a Makaba, and then I think there was like just some way to just I think you just hard activated Fusion Destiny. Sorry, Red. No, it could have been Ref. Was there
There
really
were
cheat activate?
definitely
It's
decks
just
that
Verte.
played Red Eyes Fusion, but you couldn't do all of it on the same turn because Red Eyes Fusion locks you. But there
Yeah.
definitely were decks where the main plan was just to like activate Red Eyes Fusion and then sit on the Dragoon and pass.
Yeah, Dragoon was like hugely popular in the OCG. Any kind of like deck that ran Dragoon was really powerful because if you got Max Seed, you could just make Dragoon.
Yep.
And an Omni Negate, untargetable, indestructible body that got bigger, that burned you.
Yeah.
Like, it was so powerful, especially into like Max E, because it was just one or two more summons, and you had this crazy boss monster.
Yep.
But yeah, then DPE kind of took over. A lot of the value of Destroy Phoenix Enforcer in all of these decks was because of the fact that, you know, it's really good. You know, it's not as powerful as Dragoon per se, but it's stickier. And it also gives you really good follow-up. The next draw phase, you're summoning a guy from your hand, or emptying your hand, and then banishing to then Pot of Greed.
Yep.
Like, it was such a powerful card. And even in hindsight, when you look back, they were both legal at the same time for a decent amount of time.
People preferred.
And everyone was playing DPE. It also
I mean,
helped
aren't
you
they
sidewalk.
literally? They're still legal. They're both legal at the moment, right? For us.
Well, there's no Verte, which makes them.
I guess
kinda
that's
defeat-
fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and in Master Duel, there's Verte and DP, but there's no Dragoon for some reason. Like, Dragoon is definitely not as good as DP, so I don't know why it's like that. But yeah, going into 2022.
I mean, this is basically what you're describing. We are already in 22. This is adventure format, DPE, Scythe in every deck. They have two separate formats listed here, one with branded and one without branded, but for whatever it's worth, I would probably talk about the Nationals format of that year, which has like 30 different decks, which sounds cool if you think about it, but then the reality is that all of those decks are toxic as hell because they're all just trying to do the same thing. It's all like, well, I'm gonna summon Baron, I'm gonna summon Scythe, I'm gonna D-Barrier, I'm gonna, in Flu's case, Barrier Statue. In Branded's case, Branded was like the exception of a deck that I don't think they summoned a Floodgate at this point in time, but they lost to all the Floodgates, which was kind of weird. Yeah, I played Libromancer at that national championship. I did not do well.
Liberals, huh? Liberals. Got my first tier 2 plus event top during that format.
Oh yeah, Sword Soul, right? That deck was cool.
Yeah, it was. I think like Sword Soul was really fun, and it was fun to play against. I think in a mirror match generally, like it was decent. But I think like the story of this format sadly is just a lot of decks was just Scythe with different coats of paint.
Yeah, and not just Scythe, because like I'm thinking of Sword Soul, and like the core Sword Soul package is really cool and interactive and balanced. But then a lot of the gameplay against Sword Soul revolved around the fact that they were able to draw a bunch of cards in their combo, and when they went first post side, you were almost certain that they had like 3 anti-spell, 3D barrier in their deck. So like it was just.
Can I just give some context to me calling like that, because you just ignored me? I thought you were going to talk about Flunder. Now I just sound insane. Sorry,
Okay,
continue.
good. I just didn't know what to make of that. Like I
thought you were gonna bring up the barrier statue.
I wanted to finish my thought, but in the back of my head, I was like, why did that just happen when I was talking about Sword Soul?
All right, so birds arrive at this point. Yeah, so go on. Yeah, what were you saying?
No, I'm done.
Okay. All right. Now let's try and sound as normal as I can at this point. Yeah, Flunder is really popular. Must be also mentioned that like it's a very frustrating format. You're getting debarriered and branded. People were so down bad they were citing Cross out for it, or Epsilon. I think the Gamma cards for it, the Cyframe cards, to stop trap cards. So you were getting Scythed. You were getting a barrier statue summoned against you. The only way to out a barrier statue was to normal summon an attack over it, which they, if they have the field spell, well, your turn, our turn. What else sucked that format? I remember it being like pretty egregious.
I mean, Halka Fibrax is still here. Adventure
there was
combos.
Almost
all the adventure combos ended on DPE, Baron, Scythe.
And there was also the Punk deck, remember, that used to make Calamity.
Yeah.
It was a very watered down, like basically an FTK format.
I think it's the best example of why diversity in itself does not necessarily mean good format. Like often diversity is good for a format, especially in retrospective when you have a bunch of different things that you can explore. I think that format specifically is one example where it's only diverse on paper, because in practice most of the stuff is just different flavors of Floodgate and locking your opponent out of the game. So it's, yeah, I didn't like it that much.
Yeah, so diversity if you're playing is fine. Diversity if you're just reskinning FTKs is not so great.
Because like
Um,
all the decks were doing some degenerate stuff, and you couldn't really even prepare for it because there was like 30 different decks, so you couldn't just like prepare for all of them, if that makes sense, which made it really frustrating. Because yeah, overall, yeah. And once
well,
again, Toad arrives to save the day.
is why? What do you mean? How?
All power of the elements, Sprite and Tier.
Okay. I I guess at this time, yes. Because they don't have the Ishizu cards, so it's like
Yeah,
tier isn't as strong, so you do have a decent balance.
yeah.
But it's really interesting to know at this point in OCG. I don't remember why. Why was Sprite so much better than tier?
It does not make
Or
sense. Don't think too
or
hard about it. It makes no sense because usually the argument that you would make in those cases is like, well, that deck is better against Max C. Tearlaments is infinitely better into Max C than Sprites, and they still preferred Sprites over it. You could say it's Garura, which they didn't
how is it
have.
Garura?
It was a TCG exclusive.
But like, is it that important?
I don't think so. I think if I was playing the OCG at that time, I would have still played Tier. Because if you got Max Seed, you just kit Kalos into like Salik and pass. So
Hmm.
I don't agree with their decision to mainly play Sprite. For us, I felt like Sprite was more viable because we didn't have Max C, and Sprite is the kind of deck that just can't play under Max C, while Tearlaments can. So I don't know. They just like they preferred Sprite. For us, it was closer. A lot of people preferred Danger Tearlaments. I personally loved Sprite a lot. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I think
like.
like the tier pre Ishizu and over in TCG just have more tools because I think they Snow was still legal. You had Curious to make with Dangers, so I think that's what really helped it a lot in TCG.
I mean, it was just full power, barring the Tearlament cards, right? We had Curious, we had Snow, we had Dangers. We didn't have to worry about Maxi, so we could just all in combo, right? And I guess that was the one thing that Tier didn't have in the OCG was like consistent ways to start playing outside of just normal summon Rhino Heart, I guess, right? So
Yep. And then I think like, is there more Sprite cards? I think Sprite has most of its tools, but the biggest addition is the Ishizu cards in was it October
so
or?
initially Sprite doesn't have Sprint, at the first wave. The first wave is like I think this format is what most people remember for stuff like Mystic Mine, right? Mystic Mine is legal in this format, which is the one where like at Euros I played like Mystic Mine Sprite and like Beat Cop countered on it because everyone was playing uh exactly one out to it. Oh, I'm on my own now. Okay, cool. Um yeah, we got Mystic Mine was the one card that kind of quote unquote ruined this format, but I think it wasn't all that bad at that time. Like people were starting to play outs to it and all that. It was still obnoxious to deal with, of course. But then you have Runic release. So I understand why Farfa left, I think. You have Runic right before that's actually before Ishizu tier, right? Runic is before Ishizu tier. So we have this short period in time where you have Runic Sprite versus Tearlaments, which I think that's when, in my personal opinion, that's when Sprite takes over tier because Runic Sprite was just that powerful. Also, we lost. Wasn't this the time we lost Ronin Toden or something? We lost Ronin Toden eventually. Yeah, I think Ronin Toden got banned and Snow, and that kind of ruined Sprite more than it ruined Tier, because Tier could play without Snow, but it was harder to play Sprite without Ronin. But then when we got Runic cards, that was solved, because then you could, like, Runic Sprite was fine. So that was the end of the like, well, when was Utrecht? October 2022? Maybe November? I think it's October. And then you get Ishizu tier in like November or December. and then it's obviously tier 0 Ishizu tier format, right? Darkwing Blast and Magnificent Mavens releases, which basically makes it so that everyone is playing Ishizu tier or Shifter Flu or Shifter Sprite. Which, funnily enough, guys, I've told the story a couple times on stream. I have actually revisited Ishizu tier format as a Time Wizard format, and if you play it without being forced to play it, it's actually all right. Hello, are we back? I can't hear him anymore.
Apologies.
Okay.
I had a small emergency. Yeah, where we at?
Okay, no worries. We are talking about Ishizu tier elements.
Okay. I can't really offer too much about that because, ironically enough, I ended up really falling in love with tier after it was good, which is
You
very
were
sad.
a hater at the time. I know that.
Yeah, I
I
think
mean,
it was just
I will
'cause,
say
like,
though, I feel like we all were at some point. Everyone except Jesse Cotton specifically. We were getting sick of tier at some point because there's just something about tier 0 formats, even if they're good playing wise. I will
that's
say this
always
is the
the issue,
first.
right?
Huh?
I mean, that's always the issue, right? It doesn't matter how like you love chicken nuggets, like you just kind of want something else eventually, you
I
know.
think one
And
major part for me personally is also the fact that it's my first tier 0 format as a content creator. Because I don't remember ever having this feeling towards something like a full year of Dragon Rulers or a full year of Necros, right? Which were also decks I played for a year. Yeah, they slightly changed over time, but like they were also very dominant for a long time. But with tier, I felt that frustration not only from my personal perspective, but also from like creating content in a format like this is tough, right? Because people, even if I don't get tired of it, people get tired of it. So, and like there's only so much you can say about Ishizu tier, right? The deck had like a solved list at some point. What do you want me to like stream about, right? Like that's kind of, I think, one thing why I personally disliked that format after a while, because I was just like, it affected me in more ways than just playing. Because if I had just played some events, I don't think I would have minded it. Like I think playing wise, it was okay, you know. So
it's interesting. Maybe it's like the culture of society has changed a lot in like the space of like previous tier 0 decks compared to
mhm.
tier, where I think people are a lot, I suppose, like harder to entertain. And I think if it just goes on for too long and lasts too long, then people just very much lose interest. Whereas back in the day, like before like big social media booms and stuff like that, well, it was your social circle, it was your hobby,
Yeah,
and like the game is just an accessory
yeah.
to
No
that.
one really had that problem during Necros format because I don't think there was any like full time Yu-Gi-Oh streamer or anything in 2015 already.
Probably not. No, I don't think so.
So there was like no one worried about entertaining like a competitive audience for like months about the same deck, right? So it's like I at least I felt that for the first time during Ishizu tier. It
Hmm.
is a key learning for me because I previously to being a content creator, I have only looked at formats from my own personal perspective, right? Like if I was successful during Necros format because it was a skillful format, I liked it, right? And so during my time as a content creator and during Ishizu tier format, it was the first time I saw other perspectives on this sort of situations, right? As a content creator, or also like as more like casual people in the audience who just get tired of it, are like voices that I used to not hear as much because I would just travel to big tournaments and I wouldn't like talk to everyone about like, hey, how do you like the current format? Whereas nowadays, I daily I'm confronted with a lot of people sharing their opinions on the current format. So I think that was at least for me personally, looking back, I think that was interesting.
Yeah. Interesting points. I think like a huge factor as well is also like it feels like repetitive in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that like you kind of go through the same cycle of here's a new broken deck, you have to play the new broken deck. It's also really expensive. Tier maybe not so much, but definitely recently, especially now coming up with Fiendsmith. Um, and I think like people are just kind of getting a little bit burnt out of that same sort of pattern that's been essentially the whole of Yu-Gi-Oh's lifespan. Now, there's alternative card games that are offering people similar social circles and other ways to play the game, and different ways that a company interacts with its community and player base.
Mhm.
So maybe people just feel like because there's a huge One Piece Pokemon community growing alongside Yu-Gi-Oh, I think maybe sometimes people look over to that and see, well, this is how it could be, right?
I don't know if the people's frustration has really changed over time, because I think looking back, I feel like people felt that frustration during Goki format, or during, there's also probably people that felt the same way during Necros format or whatever. Um yeah, I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that we are exposed to it way more than we were back in the day. I don't know.
Mm.
I'm not sure if
I think
people feel more negatively towards it than they did like when Dark Armed Dragon came out and was $300, or when Minerva was a playable price card, or when Necroza Brionac was $80, or all those kind of things, right? I'm not sure if,
I think it's like
yeah,
social media in general just being a really dominant part of our lives
yeah, it
that even
amplifies,
even
I feel
if
like, those voices a lot.
yeah, like in 2015 maybe you just aren't like online all the time and you
Yeah,
aren't hearing constant opinions,
yeah,
and even if you do have your own personal opinion today in this age, it's hard to ignore
yeah,
the greater negativity on Twitter or
yeah.
Facebook or and I think it's like you just naturally as a human being you get affected. Um
And I think it's more that than actually a more negative spot than Yu-Gi-Oh has ever been in. I don't personally believe in that.
I think it's one of those things we can you never know when you're in the moment. Always one of those you have to retrospectively look back on and then compare to where your new position is.
Hmm.
Um, there is a huge frustration with a lot of players right now, for example, right? But
Yeah.
then I look back at like some periods of 2018 and I'm just like, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was like this is Yu-Gi-Oh's 9/11. This is unplayable. This is terrible. And then yet we move forward, we
Yeah,
break
see?
records, and the game is still going. So who
See, that's
knows?
what I
Maybe
meant earlier. Like, if we got through those phases, surely we'll get through this one.
yeah. So yeah, at some point in February of 2023, after Teal of Shizu, we get the Photon Hypernova. And the big is this the start of? No, I guess Tier is the first Visa's lore deck. Anyway, we get the counter to Tier. It's Kashtira. It's
A Rise Heart is the counter to Tier and also every other Yu-Gi-Oh card.
yeah, literally. It's really ironic because it'd be interesting to see how it would be played in hindsight. But we had one format where Tirishizu was full power, and Photon Hypernova was legal,
Yeah.
and Photon and Cash Tira got a third of the top cut spot, um, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? To think that full power tier was. I mean, it's just is it a dice roll thing? Like, do you just lose against the
It's a shifter thing, I'm pretty sure.
shifter as well? I mean, a third of the time you could get shifted. I suppose, right? Hmm. But yeah, Photon Hypernova is a pivotal part of the game. Um, Sometimes it would be nice to see how formats would develop without a ban list when there's a new set, just to
Mhm.
see like what the set does to it.
They have been doing
Um,
that more often in the past, though. In the last couple years, I feel like they've been more willing to just let it run for a little bit. I feel like that's a big thing in 2022, for example. I remember, for example, the adventure engine being on everyone's radar when it came to Forbidden and Limited List predictions, and it just never happened. And as it turns out, it also was fine, like, to not happen.
mm.
So yeah, you kind of got to give him credit for that, because everyone was expecting it, and they just were like, "No, we're confident we can like balance these out with just releasing other stuff." So,
Yeah, sometimes a format doesn't need a list. It is just a case of a new set will bring everything. I think like it's funny. Like one of the specific things I remember is late 2016 is how much people wanted a ban list. I think for I think like people complaining about Denko, like Metal
hmm.
Foes was like annoyingly powerful. But then like they just released Raging Tempest and we got Zoo.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you sometimes you just don't need a list.
So yeah,
Uh
after Ishizu tier gets uh kind of murdered, not completely murdered as it turns out, because it did come back eventually. Tier limits, that is. But
mhm.
we basically enter something that I would refer to as Cash Tira format, even though it's not really like, there's one thing I want to give to Kashtira. The deck is, I think it's super annoying, and a Rysart is a super overtuned card. But the one thing I kind of like about this format is that Kashtira was one of the more beatable tier 1 decks or dominating decks out there, simply because it didn't come with any Omni negates, anything of that nature. It was the legit, like, it was a super oppressive deck, and you needed to draw the out. But if you drew the out, you were very realistically able to beat the deck, right? Like a Talons to take the Rysart, at least once they got rid of the zone lock, right? Because there's like 2 stages to this format, where the first one is with zone lock, and
Gosh,
then the
yeah,
second one is without it, because they get rid of Mind Hacker. And the
yeah.
second one I actually think is like somewhat of an all right format to go back into. It's not like my favorite of all time. I'm not gonna go back and play like second half of 2023 Kashtira format. But it's like uh it was all right, you know. Like, for example, I got through that format without ever being forced to play Kashtira. I was just playing different flavors of Runic, but like I never had to play Kashtira, which
This
was
is the
nice.
7th show and tell you've brought Runic, Josh. I think we've always described on the podcast like the most fun games of Yu-Gi-Oh is like where you're actually going back and forth and interacting with your opponent.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most egregious points of Kashtira's existence was it was a draw the out deck, as you mentioned. It is like, okay, on the condition that I do draw the out and I also draw some cards to play, and I haven't been shifted, then playing against Kashtira is fine. But
It was like a paywalled good format.
yeah,
Like,
there's
if
a
you got,
couple of
not really
conditions.
paywall, but you know what I mean. Like, you had to get through to 1 or 2 instances of if checks to see if you could play a good game of Yu-Gi-Oh. But then you could.
Yeah. But at some point, a Rysart gets banned on the day 1 of the UK National Championship, and I think, is it YCS Passage?
It was some YCS. I don't know where.
In the middle of an event on a Saturday, for the first time in history, I think,
Yeah.
Konami drops a ban list. Philadelphia, that's the one. A Rysart gets banned. It gets limited? Wait, did they
No, it
ban a
already is
Rysart?
limited at this point, I think.
Yeah,
Or isn't it?
yeah. It gets banned in the summer, like literally in the middle of an event.
Wait, so there's multiple stages through this, right? The first ban list,
Oh,
Diablosis gets banned.
oh, it got limited. Oh, I think Diablosis gets banned, and a Rysart gets limited. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we missed Super Heavy Samurai. What?
No,
Where
we
was
don't
that
miss
in
that.
this? I can't remember where that was, but okay. Super Heavy Samurai just immediately dies. It was good and pretty playable for like I think like it might have been like a month.
It was not
And
long. Yeah.
they just banned Scarecrow, which, I don't think we're obviously too upset about, but in the OCG it did stick around for a while.
Yeah. So that was that ban list. The first one during Kashtira quote unquote format is
3
Diablosis
weeks.
ban, Scarecrow ban, and a Rysart limit. And so
Yeah.
that's the format I'm referring to as like the all right Kashtira format, right? Because they can zone lock you, and you have like a solid chance to out their board if you draw like a board breaker. So that's also the format that Euros is played in and all that stuff, right? And then eventually past that point is when a Rysart gets banned. We get like the Rescue Ace support and all that, and we're approaching YCS Dortmund and YCS Bologna formats, which are kind of I think those are like probably the one of the best ones in recent years, I want to say, in terms of like deck diversity and what kind of decks are popular. Because I'm thinking like, hey, Unchained is out, you know, Rescue Ace is fine, you get the Fire King stuff, free Snake Eye full power is actually all right, an all right deck that top. You have some Centurions top in here and there, Labyrinth, you know, it's a pretty solid format, I think.
I liked it. This is
Yeah.
the period of time where people are complaining about deck diversity, because there's, I think, like we see like
This is the time where I was complaining that I couldn't decide for a deck, so I just said screw it and played the Bestial Runic.
yeah, and then that worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
But I thought it was fine. It
I
was
in hindsight, I agree. I shouldn't have complained.
yeah, cool. That makes sense. The time period as well, where you got to pick a ban list. Wasn't that really fun?
Oh, you mean because Circular got banned?
Yeah, and didn't they hit a plant card as well? They
Maybe.
limited the link ones, did they not?
It was a good ban list. Good times.
Yeah, that was a Josh ban list right there. um, so I think that kind of brings us to where we are today,
I
which
mean,
is
this is then, yeah, followed by
Poplar.
Poplar. Yeah, Poplar, and now Fiendsmith.
Well, we'll have the Infinite Forbidden podcast most likely next week once all of the I don't want to say leaks, but the information that is technically not available to the public and anyone who proliferates as such needs to immediately send in their COSI ID. But
Long story
for
short,
reference,
next week is Infinite Forbidden in-depth talk. We're not doing it
yeah.
today for reasons. We're doing it next week for other reasons.
For reference, like this isn't anything to do with us being Konami partner, influencer partners. It's because it is literally in the policy documents, and you know people have literally been banned for discussing stuff
Can't
that has
talk
been
about
released early.
leaks.
So just have to explicitly tell you guys, like, unfortunately, we cannot talk about it because if you do publicly post about it and stuff, in theory, according to the policy, you can be banned for it. And I would like to play Yu-Gi-Oh. I think Josh wants to go back to Worlds this year. I'm not sure though.
I would prefer to, yes. I would prefer to talk about these in a week. All things considered.
Yeah, so Infinite Forbidden podcast is next week. As mentioned at the start, we have finally started up the Patreon for a singular $1 per month. You can access the Discord. Participate
was this
in the
podcast 2.5 hours?
It was a while, yeah. We took a little detour with Mulchummy, but
I was halfway through. I was thinking if we do it 3 parts, but I thought like, nah, let's just power through it.
Yeah. So yeah, Patreon will be in the description by the time you get this. Join our Discord for Patreons, and you can help direct the creativity of the podcast topic outlines and stuff. And of course, we're going to make a dedicated 10-15-minute section to each podcast going forward for the Patreon question, which you can submit in the Discord, which will be available soon. Smile. So yeah, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next episode for Infinite Forbidden.